I know normally this is the part of the year-end review for me where I do a Logan Cruz style breakdown amongst how much of a insane up and down ordeal the year is, but in light of how much 2022 was a bit of an up and down year for me, let's just say, I'm going to entirely forgo doing that this year because I just want to get into the main meat of everything. All I'm going to say before we get into everything is rest in peace to the following people: Sidney Poitier, Bob Saget, Peter Robbins, Meatloaf, Louis Anderson, Ivan Reitman, Emilio Delgado, William Hurt, Scott Hall, Taylor Hawkins, Estelle Harris, Gilbert Gottfried, Ray Liotta, George Shapiro, Billy Kamitz, Everett Peck, Kazuki Takahashi, Lenny Von Dolhelen, James Caan, Shinzo Abe, Tony Cicero, David Warner, Paul Sorvino, Nichelle Nichols, Pat Carroll, Olivia Newton-John, Anne Hesh, Wolfgang Peterson, Queen Elizabeth II, Coolio, Antonio Inoki, Angela Lansbury, Robbie Coltrane, Jan Rabson, Jerry Lee Lewis, Aaron Carter, Dan McCafferty, Kevin Conroy, Leo Gallagher, Jason David Frank, Irene Cara, Clarence Gilliard Jr., Christine McVie, Bob McGrath, Kirstie Alley, Mills Lane, Mike Hodges, Ruggero Deodato, Pele, Don West, and Barbara Walters. May you all rest in peace. Alright, this is actually just a quick post edit here for the in memoriam section, but there was a death in 2022 at the tail end that was not reported of someone in the YouTube community, and that is Uche Nwari, who is a former football guard who played in the Jacksonville Jaguars for 7 seasons, and he had his own YouTube channel as well, and he appeared on a lot of other channels such as Midnight's Edge as well. It's a very sudden death too, and this is only now in because we just now found out about that. Sorry for having to throw this in a little last minute, but this kind of came up spontaneously. This shit sucks. May he rest in peace alongside everyone else mentioned in the in memoriam section. Now, with the in memoriam out of the way, it's time to get into the games I played in 2022. There was a lot to cover here, so yeah. For those of you who are just watching this for the first time, you'll see what things are about soon enough. So we're going to be here a while. Grab yourself a snack and a drink. Maybe put this on the background while you're doing your laundry, dishes, or cleaning around the house in general. Or hey, let this video help put you to sleep as some kind of audiobook in a weird way, as I recap just about every game I played in 2022. January is always the month where you gotta try and get as much in before school and work pick back up. So here was a big one actually for me to start the year off with: Ace Combat Assault Horizon. I don't know what it was in the early 2010s, but it definitely felt like a lot of Japanese-oriented franchises were trying to Americanize themselves. Between Namco's also own Ridge Racer Unbounded, which was made by Bugbear, the people who made the Flatout games, this, and, well, Capcom's DMC Devil May Cry, it was a very odd thing, per se. Fortunately, a lot of these companies have realized that this was a bad way of approaching these franchises, and, well, have, well, gone back to making these franchises what they are, basically, focusing on the actual good. That said, though, this still definitely isn't a bad game by any means necessary, but it definitely feels less oriented like Ace Combat, as it's actually set in the real world as opposed to a fictional universe compared to the mainline Ace Combat games, Ace Combat 4, 5, 0, 6, and 7. Also, it tried to throw in a bunch of new mechanics, mainly the dogfighting mode, basically, to try and make the intensity bigger than it normally was and bring the action closer to the player. And so, in a weird way, this dogfighting mode is like when enemies are on your ass, basically, or you're trying to get on someone's ass, you have to be careful to dodge them, basically. And if you can get the upper rank gain on them, you can click both of the bumper buttons here, or L1, R1 if you're on PlayStation 3, and you can basically get right behind them and get a clear shot with your machine guns. You can save your missiles for the later, tougher parts, and yeah. There also are some other sections that are oddly different enough, but the whole story definitely feels very different from the other Ace Combat games. It's not a bad thing. I've been trying to get back into playing this one here so I could knock it off my list, because I started it years ago but never finished it until now. You know, I do like it, but it's not my favorite Ace Combat game overall. That's still Ace Combat 6, The Fires of Liberation. I have not played 7, but if I can get it for a decent price, I may pick it up. So after Ace Combat Assault Horizon, in the meantime, actually I should say, I was working on starting another series on Twitch. And so I started the Brothers in Arms series. This is an old series of World War II themed shooters that came out about the mid to late 2000s, when the genre was still somewhat popular. I do think eventually it was starting to lose some of its luster at this point, though. By the time we get to the last game, you'll see what I mean. But Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 was the first of these games, basically. It runs on Unreal Engine 2, and yeah. The thing about this game also is that it also tried to do some more strategy elements to it compared to, say, the console Call of Duty games, or even the Medal of Honor games for that matter. When you're doing the missions, there are two different teams. There's Fire Team and Assault Team, basically. Fire Team basically fixes the enemy with suppressed fire, and Assault Team is good for, well, assault. And sometimes you have tank sections as well, which are pretty interesting. And you can command your teams as well, kind of like the Rainbow Six series. Though, honestly, it's very much damn hectic, and I feel like it leans into the strategy element just a wee bit too much, basically. And on top of that, you have to be really accurate with your aim, or else you're going to be in for a very rough time. Honestly, this game was pretty rough, and I don't think it's personally aged that well from having to play some of the things. There are a handful of bad sections. This is one of those ones you're just going to have to turn the cheats on and just have a hell of a time or something, I guess. Taking a break from the Brothers in Arms talk, we're going to Siphon Filter Dark Mirror. Now, with me having already acquired Logan's Shadow months prior to actually playing this one, I figured it'd only be fair that I play this before I get into Logan's Shadow, which was the last Siphon Filter game, and the one that technically came, well, after this one, after Dark Mirror. Dark Mirror was actually originally a PlayStation portable game, but was later ported to PlayStation 2. This time they decided to go back, basically, to the series roots, as opposed to Omega Strain, which was more, I guess, open-ended, and, well, more online-focused as well. And so, Dark Mirror basically goes back to the standard third-person array of things here, and honestly, it feels like a better return to form than expected, actually. It pretty much is your typical third-person action stealth shooter game, but definitely it's one of those where if things go haywire, at least on a lower setting, you can usually blast your way out of a jam, basically. The story itself is fine, actually, too, and definitely actually putting you back in the shoes of Gabe Logan helps. Though the one bad thing about the PS2 version is that it actually was censored, basically. A lot of the violent, swearing, alcohol, and frightening scenes were actually taken out from the PSP version, which was rated M, but they censored the game so much on the PS2 that it ended up getting a T rating instead. I wonder if every Siphon Filter really did have a specific M rating, but all I can find are PAL copies right now on Wikipedia. But they probably did at some point here. Yeah, again, PAL cover for Dark Omega Stream, but whatever. But Dark Mirror's good. Play it at some point. Now we're going back to Brothers in Arms. We have the sequel, Brothers in Arms Earned in Blood. Actually, I would say this is less of a sequel and more of an expansion pack than yeah. And, whew, well, this game has a different, protagonist. As opposed to playing as Matt Baker in the original game, you play as Sergeant Joe Red Hartstock. And Hartstock was actually the corporal of Baker's fire team in the first game, and they were part of the historic Normandy invasion in the previous game. Because that's always the big one, you know, D-Day, basically. There are new multiplayer missions in this one, and new weapons, new vehicles, a new co-op skirmish mode, and the AI has been improved as well. And level designs are more, well, open-ended, basically. But by and large, it's pretty much the same game, or pretty damn similar to the first. It runs on the same engine, Unreal Engine 2. Unfortunately, though, it still has a lot of the same problems as the first one. It's still pretty brutal and can definitely be an unforgiving game if you're not careful. It is shorter because it's just an expansion pack, but I definitely also had some with this one. Still, again, blast the cheats on and have a hell of a time. Next up is Injustice 2. Now, this was one I bought in the 2021 Steam sale and made it a priority to go and play this one. I really did actually enjoy the first Injustice game quite a bit, actually. And I feel like the sequel is actually even better than the first game, basically. There are minor adjustments to the mechanics, but by and large, it is basically the same game. Although I'm not a fan of the loot dropping rewards ordeal here, but I digress with that. The story itself is also pretty good as well here, as of course you would expect. And it was also kind of, I guess, bittersweet to a degree, because if I recall correctly, this is basically the last Injustice game to have Kevin Conroy as the voice of Batman before his unfortunate passing. It's a pretty weird story, basically, here, because, well, back to Batman and his insurgency's attempt to restore society after the fall of Superman's regime is what the story's about. But then, once the society, basically, the secret society of supervillains, makes their presence known, and Brainiac, they force Batman to consider freeing the imprisoned Superman to help combat the threats. Okay, yeah, the story's a bit weird in some parts, you know, but yeah, but the game is still pretty good. It does play well, the story is presented at least well, and the voice acting is always damn good. And the gameplay definitely does feel a lot much better than the previous game, but I do feel like these sort of Mortal Kombat ones always have some kind of emphasis on you learning at least a handful of crazy moves, basically, these NetherRealm-like games. And trust me, we're going to adjust that later on more, but play Injustice 2 if you like the first one. And we can add another one here to the list of games I played as a kid that have not aged well, a la Dukes of Hazzard, Return of the General Lee. This is the Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, Jet Fusion. Now, there were at least a few 6th-gen games, console stuff, that was at least based off the Jimmy Neutron license. You had the original Boy Genius one, based off the original movie. You also had this one, and Attack of the Twonkies, which we'll be addressing later on. But for now, Jet Fusion was one of the ones based off the television film as well. One of the more expanded episodes, basically. This special here, Jet Fusion, basically, well, it was basically, it followed, if I could speak properly. I need to pull it up here, I'm sorry. See, this is what happens. I go off the cuff. But The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, Jet Fusion was based off the TV special Operation Rescue Jet Fusion. The basic plot is that Jimmy has to write a book report, and he invents this virtual world reproduction machine, which shows the class what the book is about like a movie. And so Jimmy places his Jet Fusion book into the machine, and unsurprisingly, it goes to hell. So Retroville becomes this sort of virtual world. Then his arch nemesis, Professor Calamitous, kidnaps Jet Fusion, and it's up to Jimmy to save him, basically. So, yeah, it's actually somewhat different here, basically, here. Because, well, we have to rescue Jet Fusion, as opposed to, well, the actual special where Jimmy teams up with him. Yeah, honestly, this game is pretty much your, what should be a run-of-the-mill platformer, basically, that is bogged down by several bad design choices that make the game way more frustrating than it has any right to be. If I had actually beat this as a kid, I would have had more patience for it. However, as an adult, no, not at all. Not at all. Actually, I kind of want to break this one down fully, so I'm just going to leave it at that here. I know other people have, but damn it, I have my own personal gripes with it. So, yeah, that was a letdown. Now, back on the Brothers in Arms trains, we go to the last mainline Brothers in Arms games. Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway. Now, this is the third entry in the franchise, and it actually runs on Unreal Engine 3. Once again, we go back into Matt Baker as well. Once again, basically, we go back into the shoes of him and the men of the 101st Airborne Division, the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment in the later stages of World War II, this time during Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands. Now, because Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway actually runs on Unreal Engine 3, there's a lot of improvements for starters. Like, the game definitely feels a lot more polished than the previous two entries in the franchise, in my opinion. And it controls a bit better in some parts too, and the biggest thing, though, is the cover system. Now, this is a major freaking improvement. At the time, cover systems in third-person shooters and some first-person shooters were starting to become popular thanks to their appearances in games like Gears of War and Rainbow Six Vegas. And this game decided to take advantage of that. It definitely makes combat a bit much easier as well, since now you're no longer having to just run behind other objects and stuff. You now have a proper cover. And on top of that, there's actually, it's destructible cover, so you can destroy wooden fences and sandbags by gunfires or grenades. And they added in a regenerating health system, basically. They represent this, a character's exposure to threat rather than resilience to damage, where you're exposed to enemy fire, and it starts to become harder for you to see. Remain under fire, you die. Remaining safe from enemy fire thus quickly remove the threat. Although I'm not quite sure in some parts. You still have to deal with the tactical system, which I still don't feel was quite a mix in well. I feel like this is probably the best game to have it implemented. The best way it's implemented in this one. But honestly, it definitely still feels a bit rough in some parts. It definitely is the best game in the entire franchise, if you ask me. And that cover system really does make a difference, but there are also still some BS sections that, again, you just don't tolerate much anymore. Oh well, if you have to play one Brothers in Arms game, play this one. Oh boy, here's another bleh one. WWE Crush Hour. Let me explain what happened, how I got this game. You see, I ended up buying Shadow Hearts from the New World online because the copy at my local store that was $10 disc only actually was gone. And I ended up buying a case and manual from one of my usual joints I go to get it online. Well, lo and behold, when I go back into the store actually, next time I go there, the game actually came back. I don't know how, but I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm acting on this one now. I am not putting this one off any longer. So I ended up jumping on it disc only for $10, and really, with any Shadow Hearts game at that price, can you blame me? And so eventually I fixed that disc only copy and made it complete in box. But the bad news was the case that it shipped in had a WWE emblem case. The problem is I already have every WWE PS2 exclusive game that I could have gotten basically from when I started recollecting retro about now what? Almost, oh geez, how many years ago? 6? Oh my good grief. Where did this time go? Anyways, So I had no choice but to pick this game up, and I always heard mixed things about how it was a worser version of Twisted Metal set in the realm of WWE, and everyone's not wrong. The game can be fun with multiplayer, but genuinely with single player, it's not even anywhere near close to like the level of Twisted Metal Black, or even Twisted Metal Head On for that matter. Just buy those two games instead. You can both get them on the PS2 as well, and they're much better. This game, it gets very boring in single player after a while. There's no specials like to unlock through the game, like through how you would unlock things in Twisted Metal Black. And it looks a little bleh. The game modes aren't exciting. Some of them are actually very damn frustrating in parts. And it's just so bleh, so bad I ended up trading the fucker in, and guess what? I haven't looked back since. I had to restore it too, because it wasn't even in the best of condition, yet it still played miraculously. Also, having to replay through the game a ridiculous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 8 to 9 times or so just to get everything unlocked. Okay, more like 8, because I'm pretty sure one of these is a cheat character, but still, it's just not bleh. It's such a mediocre game. Don't play it. Play Twisted Metal Black or even Twisted Metal Head On instead. Alright, back to the Jimmy Neutron train here for a minute. This is Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, Attack of the Twonkies. Well, this is the second one, also based on the episode, well, of the same name. By and large, this one is probably more accurate to the actual episode than Jet Fusion. But where it lacks up in that, it makes up for in gameplay. So in this game, you control Jimmy in a quest to save Earth from the alien Twonkies using gadgets and inventions. Although made after the episode, the levels are actually designed with the same mechanics as the film, including a rocket and theme park retro. And okay, so there are some differences. But to be fair, the gameplay in this one is much, much better. It got rid of one of the more garbage, egregious aspects of Jet Fusion in limited continues. That's what it is. And if you know me, you know that is a major pet peeve of mine in gaming, especially when there was no excuse for it in this era, or for that matter, any era. But still, to be fair, it was THQ Studios Australia handing the helm of this one, basically, while Jet Fusion was helmed by Chrome Studios. It also, Attack of the Twonkies, runs at a better frame rate. It looks a bit better, although there are still a couple garbage levels, and it just doesn't feel as egregiously padded out in some parts. Yeah, again, if you have to play one of the two Jimmy Neutron, well, technically one of the three, I should say, but I never played the original Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. But if you have to play one between Jet Fusion and Attack of the Twonkies, I'd go with Attack of the Twonkies. And speaking of mixing gameplay elements that may or may not entirely belong together, basically, here we have Brutal Legend. I also add another one to the list of games I started years ago, didn't finish, but now only came back to finish in 2022. Brutal Legend is definitely one of the most creative games for any fans of heavy metal, like, at all, basically. It's an action-adventure hack-and-slash game, but it mixes real-time strategy elements. It was developed by Double Fine, so Tim Schafer and all, and it was one of the most creative games I have ever played in my life as well. This game is practically a love letter to anyone who loves any kind of metal whatsoever. Like, straight up. And the plot is so bizarre, too. You play as a roadie named Eddie Riggs, who's voiced by and modeled after Jack Black. He's transported to this fantasy world inspired by the artwork of heavy metal album covers. And he becomes the savior of the world, leading the downtrodden humans against a range of supernatural overlords using a battle axe, his own flying V guitar that can tap into the magical powers of the world, and a customizable hot rod. So basically, you have this sort of mix of action and adventure. You'll control Eddie roaming around, and typically you'll hack and slash away at enemies. But when you're battling, actually, as well, you also have these other people you can control, these other groups of, like, I guess, army members you can control. So you have real-time strategy elements, but you're also fighting alongside them as well. And so basically you're going around helping them out, commanding them, basically taking over these stages as well. And basically you're moving through to just, you know what, if I go on any further, you're gonna think it's friggin' weird as hell. And trust me, this game is pretty fucking weird indeed. It is one of the most insane things you will ever like see, I swear. But it is absolutely worth playing if you are indeed any like heavy metal fan, basically. I mean, what other game are you going to find that also has the voices of Lemmy Kilmister, rest in peace, Rob Halford, and Ozzy Osbourne? You're not going to find it except in this game. There is a bit of a curve to it, basically, but it's such a creative damn world that if you stick out some of the more egregious stuff as well, which, need I add, the final boss of this game is only egregious, agitated more by the fact that Judas Priest's Painkiller is playing throughout it. Just play it at some point, actually. It is a pretty memorable game, and at least maybe play it once. Although, you do want to keep in mind that this thing was basically limited. Part of the reason the RTS stuff doesn't work as well is because it was limited, because this game was originally a console-only game for PS3 and 360, and later came to PC in February of 2013. Had it been a PC-first game, it probably would have been a different story, but, you know. Oh boy, you want to know pain incarnate? Try playing a Quantic Dream game. Just any of them. I swear to God, they suck you in. Quantic Dream was practically Telltale Games before Telltale Games became The Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us. Only this time, their games really took it to a whole nother level. And my unfortunate ass, because of the up and down shit, ended up playing 3 of their fucking games this year. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I have a lot to say. Let's start with this first one. Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy. Oh boy. Okay, well, it's originally known as Fahrenheit internationally, known as Indigo Prophecy in North America, and full re-release version, Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy. Oh boy. So, this is basically more at times like a movie than it is an actual game as well. It basically is action-adventure. You play from both third and first-person perspective. You actually control multiple different characters, but the main character you'll play as is a man named Lucas Kane. He gets supernaturally possessed and murders a man in a bathroom in a diner in freezing cold New York. Hence actually why the game was named Fahrenheit, basically. Because in New York, well, it's winter, and this crazy winter apocalypse happens, and somehow the supernaturalness is all connected to his murder. Like, I can't even explain it again. It's a very weird game. It's also kind of rough around the edges. As I explained in one of the streams, some of the climbing stuff, basically, and when you're having to move the mouse in a specific direction, basically I describe it as you actually having to wax on, basically, but the game not being enough. This is what you probably get for playing with a keyboard and mouse. You might have better luck with a controller, but not so much. So while the story is insane, but the characters are memorable, the voice acting is good, despite not having any major names, and the music is good. But the game itself is a bit tough to control in some parts, basically. And this game was in development for, what, 2 years? Okay, admittedly, technical limitations held it back in some parts, but I do think the later games were easier to control in the long run. But yeah, you're going to be in for one hell of a ride, basically, with Fahrenheit. And oh boy, you thought this insanity was done here? Oh, no. There's more. We will address it later. But yeah, this was actually one of the last games before the down happened for me, let's just say. And what a very, I guess, appropriate game to play at this point, too, because, you know, a man's life is going to shit, basically, for a crime he seemingly committed, but he wasn't even himself. Let's just go to the next one. Okay, the last game I beat for the month of January was Shadow Warrior 2. I had, again, fallen off of this one, but vowed to finish it, basically. Honestly, this isn't as good as the first game. Well, I do think the gameplay parts, the actual shooting and action itself, is the way the gameplay unfolds in this one feels very lackluster compared to the first Shadow Warrior 2013 game. Instead, now we basically have Borderlands and Shadow Warrior, which, look, I like the Borderlands games, I really do, but that's not what I want in my Shadow Warrior. Think back to the original Shadow Warrior, and it was pretty much Duke Nukem 3D, but with swords. Hell, I even prefer it at times to Duke Nukem 3D. Like, I go back and forth. Like, you have to ask me which day, depending on my mood. If you ask me which is better, I'll give you a different answer depending on how I'm feeling. But the Borderlands looter-shooter thing just really doesn't work in Shadow Warrior, in my opinion, and does make the game feel more drawn out, basically, than it actually is. For the record, Shadow Warrior 2013 only took me about 13.6 hours. And Shadow Warrior 2? 13.1 hours. Yeah, about the same time as the first, maybe even a little less, but it feels much more drawn out because of how things are drug out. It's not bad, but it definitely isn't as good, and I've heard they did fix a lot of the issues with Shadow Warrior 3, but I'll probably be waiting on a eventual Steam sale to buy that one, so yeah. And there goes January of 2022. We leave, fuck you, it's January, and oh my god, did I really spend that long? Oh, this is gonna be a long one. We now enter the month of February, but it's going to be a very, let's just say, slow month. You see, because of the down being as bad as it was, I had to step away from streaming for pretty much all of February. Yeah, I know it sucks, and I do apologize, but unfortunately, I had no choice at the time. Trust me. So, in the place of a normal stream, I did a pre-recorded series of videos running through the Wallace and Gromit game, the Telltale Wallace and Gromit game. This was actually one of the only classic Telltale games I had yet to beat at this point. So over the course of about 1, 2, 3 days, I finished the first 3 episodes of Wallace and Gromit's Grand Adventures, Fright of the Bumblebees, The Last Resort, Muzzled, and then on the 11th I beat the last episode, The Bogeyman. I will say, it definitely feels like a lot of them, by this point of the older style, were getting less complicated in parts, but still not enough for me to comprehend. You gotta keep in mind, a lot of these older Telltale games, before, like, pre-Walking Dead, or technically pre-Jurassic Park, but that one was a little rough around the edges, so I think many people like to forget that. But pre-Walking Dead Telltale, pre-Jurassic Park Walking Dead, was definitely a lot more in the vein of your classic 90s point-and-click game. And hell, there were even some based in those iconic LucasArts point-and-click franchises, like Monkey Island and Sam & Max. So this game definitely feels more in line with that. I'm actually glad it came back, because I missed out on it when it first came out, and it ended up getting pulled. But you can still buy it on Steam right now, and when I'm recording this, as the sale is going on, it's only $3, and at that price, it's probably worth it in the end, too, if you like this sort of thing. Next up is Polarity. Now, Polarity I picked up only because I wanted a Portal-like puzzle game, and this one I had heard a lot of good things about, so I ended up picking this up to give it a go. It's sadly not on sale now, which sucks, because it's actually kind of an enjoyable game. You have to hack this database by a client with big money and mysterious motives, and it's a very clever puzzle game as well. It definitely has like a Portal-like ambiance to it, but it actually plays very differently. You have these sort of bounce pads you can jump off of as well. You have cubes you sometimes have to put in places and take with you to the end. And it does have local co-op campaign. You cannot play this online though, which kind of sucks. Well, unless you use the remote play function. I do wish there was an online co-op in this mode. That's probably why my one gripe with it. But I do think it is a pretty enjoyable game on the whole. Now, after that, I ended up playing Visceral Cleanup Detail Shadow Warrior. This was a side bonus piece for those who bought Shadow Warrior 2013 as sort of a little tech demo for part tech demo, part demo to get you to buy Viscera Cleanup Detail, and honestly, I'm not going to be buying that game anytime soon. The basic gist is that you have to clean up some sort of horrible crime scene. In this case, after Low Wing's maddening rampage, basically, you have to clean up after it. And, well, the game is very fickle in some regards, with trying to pick up particular pieces. As a result, I was unable to get the 2 achievements on it, and just, meh. Truth is, I really don't think this type of game is for me. You really have to be detail-oriented when playing it, or else you're gonna get lost in the shuffle very fast, and you'll miss things. Honestly, it also kind of ran like crap in some parts, too, but, I don't know, the hardware was getting old in the thing. But, oh well. For those who do enjoy it, more power to you, but for me, I just don't think the Viscera cleanup stuff is my type of game. For another little quick burst of fun, and to close out February on a somewhat high note, Worms Pinball. I love pinball. I love the Worms series of games. You put those 2 things together and you got a pretty enjoyable little pinball game. So, yeah, it's F-U-N fun, and yeah, it's pinball. What more can I say about it? And now we go to March. So March was finally going to be the month I fully get back into the swing of things. Things had finally calmed down a bit, and now I can sort of fully get back. Well, ish. Let's go over the games I first went through, starting with the Endless Zone. This was actually one of those freebies that Sega gave away during their 60th year anniversary back in 2020. They had a list of these games here, basically. These 4 mini games, basically, 1 a day, and basically these were more like, I guess, homages as well to their past games. In this case, Endless Zone was one of those ones reminiscent of Fantasy Zone, and honestly, I couldn't get behind it. I tried, but I just couldn't get far in some parts, so I just said fuck it, threw it down after seeing the ending, which is a joke anyways, and after putting in enough time. And yeah, look, I didn't even like the original Fantasy Zone that much because I felt it was too difficult for its own good, or at least for my taste. And I just, again, for those who enjoy it, more power to you, but for me, I just couldn't really. Next up, I guess since spring was approaching, we're going to get to warmer weather eventually. I decided to give this visual novel I had bought, Beach Bounce, a try. Because, well, Wing It Clout wasn't going to patch any of those damn Sakura Beach games that feature the R34 madness, so I had to take what I could get. Beach Bounce probably has some better function-ish in some parts, and is less, I guess, harem-oriented in some parts as well, but genuinely, it only goes so far as well in parts. I mean, what even can I really say? I feel like there are definitely some more better choices, better way the choices affect the story for the most part, but otherwise, I mean, what are you gonna do? It is what it is. You just have to take the game for what it is. At least I can say it probably is a step up from all those Winged Cloud novels. Okay. Next one I gave a shot that was something I probably either got for free or stupidly cheap, but forgot I even had, is Neon Prism. This is actually a very interesting kind of puzzle game, basically, that also is set to rhythm as well. You have to navigate this sort of blip to this to the goal, and basically eventually the levels start getting harder. There are more obstacles you have to avoid, more other puzzles you'll have to solve throughout it, and genuinely it starts to get pretty dang insane for its own good as well. But if you do master most of it, it can be pretty fun, and I did get most of the achievements. except for one, basically, getting gold on every level. Because at this point, ugh, I just can't. Just beating it was more than enough for me. But it's a weird game again, Neon Prism. Finally, now we get to the next game that I actually fully remember really starting to sink time back into on Twitch. Well, maybe Neon Prism I did, like a fooling around ordeal. But I'm talking full bore, standard normal streams I do, and that was revisiting Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I'll keep it short and sweet. This game is definitely aged like a fine wine, and it's been, what, 11 years since it came out? I want to do a full video on this game, actually, on Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, because it's clear Capcom with the Arc System Works way of doing things when it came to this game here itself. And I definitely do think, despite a roster that's maybe not as strong as MVC2, or what some people would argue is a more, I guess, consolidated roster, it still plays amazing in some parts. I feel like just a lot of the bad will Capcom had at the time was hurting a lot of the other games, and this one got hurt. You got to keep in mind, Capcom was in a bad place like a decade ago, just doing not so consumer friendly things like Ondas DLC for Street Fighter Cross Tekken and a whole host of other bad things as well, such as not releasing the content from UMVC3 as DLC like they were originally planning to do, a la Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition stuff. But I digress. Actually, wait, original Super Street Fighter 4, this one, never mind. Look, I'm gonna make a video on UMVC3 one day. Someone remind me to. Now, finally, if I'm really gonna get back into the swing by this point, I needed a game to really just let loose on and just have one hell of a time. So I went back and finished Duke Nukem 3D Megaton Edition. It's Duke Nukem 3D. You know what? Well, what more can I say? You've probably already played it at some point, and if you haven't, please do. You can't buy the Megaton Edition anymore. You can only buy the World Tour, the Anniversary World Tour Edition, which actually removes some of the other stuff as well. A bit overpriced, although you can get it for $2 now, so I guess that's not too bad. And it's actually missing a couple of the expansion packs that were included, which we'll get into, but it still has the base game and a bonus exclusive episode. But Megaton Edition's still good. I just played through the remaining levels I hadn't been in my off time. Played the 4th episode on my Twitch. I did a little bit of fooling around with it as well on Twitch. I don't archive the fooling around stuff, because it's not proper playthroughs. And I ended up also beating the 4th episode that was included in the later releases of the game and the 2 expansion packs on Twitch. So let's get into those. Starting with Duke Caribbean Life's a Beach. This was actually the first of several officially licensed expansion packs for Duke Nukem 3D. This was released in December of 1997, ironically, despite being a beach-themed one by Sunstorm Interactive. I guess if you live in Australia or somewhere where it's normally warmer around this time of year, you're probably fine. And it has 8 levels. It has a whole new load of maps for multiplayer, some new weapons as well, such as Sandalfoot, so instead of Duke putting his boot up someone's ass, it'll be Sandalfoot. Also Water Pistol, Super Soakum, and a whole bunch of other stuff that basically reflects the tropical theme. That's typically what happens with these expansion packs. This is probably the best of the officially authorized expansion packs of Duke Nukem 3D because of its creativity-ness as well, and just overall funness, I guess. Some of the expansions didn't quite do it, but we'll get to those when we get to those. Actually, that covers most of March. Let's go into April. Starting off April, I needed another hit of nostalgia because, well, you know, nostalgia's a hell of a drug. What did GLaDOS actually say about the neurotoxin itself? Could take a bath in this stuff, put it on cereal or whatever the hell. I'm trying to even remember, but for that quick hit of nostalgia, basically. Oh, man. I could take a bath. Let me see. Yeah. Yeah, I could take a bath in nostalgia. Put it on cereal. Rub it to your eyes. Honestly, it's not deadly at all. To me. Alright, Hot Wheels Stunt Track Driver. This is a fun little game that I never properly beat because it actually is pretty damn difficult itself. But eventually, got off my ass and finished it. It's a simple on-rails kind of driving game with Hot Wheels cars. The tracks are pretty creative, and there's a bit of a curve to understanding how to keep your speed going without crashing too many times, because that's normally what happens, and having to start back is annoying, but when you do beat it, it is a very satisfying feeling. Hot Wheels Stunt Track Driver is fun. Nostalgia. Now back to the Duke Nukem expansions. We've got Duke Nukem 3D, Duke It Out in DC. This is another actually a pretty creative one. Duke It Out in DC, well, it takes place in Washington, DC, basically. You've got 10 new levels. Well, one of them's a secret level, and a new story. Aliens crash land into the Capitol building, and they're trying to invade DC. And Duke Nukem discovers that they've captured a lot of monuments and critical government buildings, but, well, it's up to Duke to basically stop the army, rescue the president from the Psychoid Emperor. This is definitely another one of those creative expansion packs, as there's definitely a lot to go around and explore within all of DC, not just the White House, but a lot of the monuments as, well, basically the Lincoln Memorial, and just about every other major landmark you can think of in Washington, D.C. is pretty much there for exploration as well. Although definitely I do think it doubles down on a lot of the more egregiously bad aspects, like of sort of not just Duke itself, but a lot of these older shooters in general, having to do all this damn puzzle solving and hunting things down, key cards, finding your way. Honestly, the where the hell do I go kind of nature is the one thing that I don't miss about these sorts of games, really. But otherwise, Duke It Out in DC is fine. Duke Nuclear Winter is probably the worst out of the 3 expansion packs that are included in the Megaton edition. I feel like even though you do tend to just retread a lot of ground with Nuclear Winter, because you start back off in like the main city in the first episode, and well, all it is snow, and even though you're definitely going into other parts, basically you're going into like similar parts, there are still some new areas still to throw you off in the end, and I don't know. I mean, there is some creativity with some of it, but I feel like a lot of the level design here is definitely the worst out of the 3 expansion packs, and it does retread a lot of this older ground, and oh well. You gotta admit, a lot of the chiptune versions of some of the classic Christmas songs are kind of nice. And yeah, Christmas in April, who would have wanted that, basically? It's technically, I think, the shortest out of all the expansion packs with only 7 levels. But honestly, there's not much changes, and just, yeah, some actually even refuse to discuss Nuclear Winter because the add-on was an embarrassment to the franchise. There are definitely better conversions and mods to play for Duke 3D as opposed to this one. I only played it because it was in the Megaton expansion pack, and there's a reason I played it last. Now that we were done with the Duke Nukem trend, trying to find other shorter games, Super Bomberman R. Super Bomberman R was, I think, the first official Bomberman game in a very, very long while, actually. Or it feels like a long while because, well, Konami, well, nuked out Hudson, so Hexadrive had to handle this one, basically. Well, technically, Super Bomberman R is the 6th in the Super Bomberman series after the 5th game, but that was only released in Japan, and possibly some of the other ones only were as well. Technically, I guess the last newer Bomberman in the mainline game was just Bomberman Ultra. But Super Bomberman R is pretty good for the most part, basically. Okay, this was the first to be released, yeah, in 20 years in Super Bomberman. And this was the first entry in the franchise to be developed for other consoles following the dissolution of Hudson Soft, the original owner. Originally, this game was a Switch exclusive, but eventually it came out on, well, it came out on PS4, PC, and Xbox One. And you know, it's actually pretty good, basically. I mean, this is not really going to break any new ground for any other Bomberman games, but generally it keeps what makes Bomberman so good and updates it into a modern setting, basically. Updated graphics, all that jazz. Yeah. You get the drill. If you like Bomberman, the good stuff, you're probably going to like Super Bomberman R. I'm looking forward to the sequel, and I may even play that on my Twitch when it comes out. In fact, I actually did beat Super Bomberman R in one go, so I may see if I can do that with the other one. We'll see. I don't know. Oh, Sakura Alien. Wing It Cloud novels. Now we get to this madness. Visual novels. Same stuff, different day. Alien comes in of sorts. Guy falls in love with girl alien, and I can't even remember. You can literally hear me typing right now to pull it up on the Steam front. Yes. University student with passion for the stars observes space far from a telescope. Strange girl claims to be an alien, crash lands into him, claims him for her husband, wants to fall in love with him, combined with other girl, basically, who is, well, also he has a crush on, and fuck it. This is a mess. Let's just go on to the next game. Ooh, here's another hint of nostalgia for ya. Lego Racers. I felt I owed this one a replay, and I even did some Twitch streaming of this, but unfortunately I couldn't beat the last race on stream. I had to do it off stream, but you know what? I did beat it again anyways. See, Lego Racers is probably a tougher game than your average Mario Kart clone, basically, because of the way the power-up system works. See, with power-ups, you basically have to first get a white block as a base, then you can collect a colored block to get you a particular power-up. The more white blocks you have, the stronger your power-up will be, so much so to the point where if you just get 3 whites and a green, you can just have a warp portal and just keep warping and warping and warping. But seriously though, despite the challenge, it definitely is worth it, and the track designs are also pretty creative as well. Driving is fun as hell. Create modes are pretty good, and yeah, play Lego Racers if you want a more challenging Mario Kart clone. Next up, I guess technically a replay, but not of the same version of the game that I played first, Onimusha Warlords. I ended up picking up Onimusha Warlords on PC so I could at least buy it there, and I guess this was a way of telling Capcom, hey, I want more Onimusha on PC, and maybe a new entry would be fucking nice. But no, we're still stuck spinning our wheels, and all we have is the first one here on PC. Technically, the original Onimusha Warlords was on PC, but that was only released in China, of all countries. I kid you not. And, kind of not really a good port, let's just say. This actually isn't the first time Onimusha has come to PC, because Onimusha 3 Demon's Siege used to be available on Steam a long time ago, but now you can't get it. This re-release of Onimusha Warlords HD has widescreen support, enhanced backgrounds and character graphics, analog stick support, a new OST, and a new Japanese audio track. This specifically is new OST because the same composer, actually, who said he was deaf, wasn't, and so he was ghost written by someone else, and they had to basically fix a bunch of that. They basically had to do a lot away with the older stuff. Despite this, though, the game is still pretty damn good, actually, for the most part itself. And actually, having now played this with actual analog controls on an actual Xbox One controller, you never want to go back to tank controls with the original. I shit you not. It makes it so much more easier, and I had less frustration. And instead of taking, well, 7-8 hours to beat Genma, it took me half that to beat here, and it ended up being 4 hours only. Despite this, the only bad thing about this port is that it does not have the Genma Onimusha additions and content. So it still feels somewhat incomplete, yet this is probably the easiest way to play this game on a modern platform, and I still would recommend it, because it's Onimusha, you know? It's a great game and all. Oh, man. Oh, and now we have to go back to Winged Cloud. Oh, man, I was enjoying that. And then they have to come in and do their shit. 5th installment, Sakura Succubus 5. Our main protagonist, Hifumi, is invited to a European country by a, Japanophile princess, Afina, if I can even pronounce shit right, and brings, well, the same usual suspect of women, basically, that he's used to. Hiroki Hazel Marina with her. Of course, the new girl takes an interest in him. New story, ya, same crap, different day. Next. Ooh, here's an interesting one. The House of the Dead remake. I did do a review of this game. I do feel like I may have overpraised some parts of it, but I still think it's a perfectly functional way to play the House of the Dead in a modern way, because you can't really play the original so much. Well, I mean, you can definitely emulate it, but unfortunately, well, sadly, the source code was lost, so they had to remake the original game from the ground up. To be fair, the Megapixel Studio stuff was fine. Kind of sucks the Panzer Dragoon remake landed with a thud like that, because I actually did play that one on stream back in 2021, I think. And I actually really did like that game for the most part, actually. Hopefully, we'll eventually get that Panzer Dragoon 2 remake soon enough. Apparently, it has yet to actually be released. It's still under development. And we're also going to get a House of the Dead 2 remake, which hopefully will be fine, but I guess we'll just have to see what happens. But House of the Dead 1 remake, it works, it's playable. Some aesthetics, though, do feel a bit off, so yeah. And to close out April, Exeus. This is an older, kind of, I guess, an older Sin and Punishment, Space Harrier kind of like game to it. Originally, this was released in arcade, and I had beaten it before on mobile platforms, and I do have the Wii version, which was known as Counterforce. It's an alright shooter kind of game. There's really not much of a difference to it. This is probably the easiest way to get a hold of it, basically, but it is difficult in some parts, and you do have limited continues. So here's a hint. Cheat Engine actually does work to a degree when you want to adjust the money amount. Oh, who am I kidding? Trust me. If they want to try and do artificial capping of stuff, I'm going to give them the middle finger back. Hey. What a mess. So yeah, the Exeus collection is a perfectly functional way to play it. There's not much to say about the game because it is basically, like I said, it's like a like Space Harriers or Planet Harriers. It's like Sin and Punishment. And it's a pretty interesting little set of games here. They're not anything special, but for a quick burst of entertainment, you could definitely do far worse. And let's go into May, where we last left off. So finally, May was, I guess, the real biggest up for me here, because I actually graduated college with a bachelor's in computer science. So yeah, that was actually pretty cool. And so, with all that madness done here, why not relax and take this month to just binge some stuff? So I did. Picking up where we last left off, Exeus 2. Now, I didn't even know there was a sequel to Exeus for a while, at least not to a certain degree, because for starters, it only originally ever came out on mobile as opposed to, say, consoles and even in arcades, because the original was an arcade game. Eventually, though, it did get re-released onto consoles, actually, separately on the Microsoft Store, for example, and even eventually got re-released in the Exeus Complete Collection, basically, which you can buy on the PC, Xbox One, PS4, and the Nintendo Switch, which is how I played these games. Exeus 2 tries to add some more other elements, and does definitely try to give this more of a varied feel than just the standard, I guess, Planet Harrier, Space Harrier kind of feeling the previous game had by having a hoverboard section and a couple other vehicle sections and some other, I guess, ground sections and other types of stationary battles. Although, to be fair, those stationary bosses were in the previous game as well. By and large, it definitely does look better, but it is more frustrating because you have no continues. You do have checkpoints if you save at the end of the levels, but the levels are longer and they can definitely feel more frustrated. But again, cheat engine tool, get your money, get the health, give them the middle finger. Yeah. You know the drill. Okay. Real Heroes Firefighter. This is a first-person firefighting game that originally came out on the Nintendo Wii way back in, what was it? It was 2009 for North America and 2010 for Europe. It later got re-released on the Nintendo 3DS and eventually got a port to the PC with an HD re-release coming, which is what came out in 2021, which is what I played. And it later came out on the Nintendo Switch, PS4, and Xbox One. It's shockingly a pretty alright kind of firefighting game. You pretty much play in the first person. You have to basically break through objects, put out fires, and by and large it's like an FPS game, but instead of guns, you're a firefighter, basically. And it's not too bad, actually, for what it does, actually, here. Although, the graphic overhaul here in this HD re-release really makes it a more cel-shaded game, a la 13, basically. But it's a pretty one with a decent story. And I was going to say, I was actually surprised with the amount of, I guess you could actually say, talent, I suppose, in the game, actually, was kind of a surprise in the voice cast, as there's actually, for the main characters, there's actually a pretty noteworthy cast for some of them, including the likes of James Marsters, aka Spike on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Shockingly, this was a big one. Jeanette Goldstein, aka Private Vasquez from Aliens, actually has a voiceover role in this game. Jamie Kennedy, of all people, does as well. And those are just a few of the no-other ones as well. Some of the bigger names in the cast, I suppose, as well. And John DiMaggio's got a voice, and a couple other lesser-known people. But, yeah, I just found that interesting. But it was an alright firefighting game. After that, I went ahead and I played... Oh boy, here we go. Another Would You Like to Run an Idle Cafe 3. Winged Cloud. Same, say it with me now. Same crap, different year. Wait. Did I say number 3 here? Hold on a second. Oh, there it is. Sorry. I must have missed it there. Silly me. Yeah, my bad. But yeah, first music video goes viral. The girls of Sweet Shoreline plus Naoya are invited to a competition in Tokyo where they can prove their worth against numerous famous idol groups. Will Sweet Shoreline prevail, or will their first big concert end in disaster? You'll never know, and I don't give a fuck anymore. Let's move on to a better game to talk about. Gun. Now, because Red Dead Redemption 1 still isn't on PC, I had to try to see what I could do anywhere to get my Western fix on PC for a third-person kind of game, like Red Dead Redemption. So this was one of my only options, actually, and I'm pretty sure I still have the cover here, the old video, the Game Crazy Hollywood catalog I have that had this game as the cover game for when it was like brand spanking new, like November of 05 as well. Polar Express was coming out on DVD, and yeah. And I will say this about Gun. It is probably a less open-ended and more faster game than Red Dead Redemption from what I've seen of that and comparing it to this. Because it's only like about a 4 to 6 hour game. Let me see, how much playtime do I have on Steam? Oh my god, it's 4.3 hours. Wow. I guess I can't really be that surprised, because it was made by Neversoft, the people who made the Tony Hawk games. But it seems like a very odd one. You know, basically, like, you wouldn't expect them to make a game like this, but it's actually pretty damn good for the most part here. You pretty much have your standard missions. You have your, you have open-ended side missions as well that you can do, bandit missions as well. And generally it has a pretty good story to it as well. You have mini games as well, like poker, cattle herding, law enforcement, bounty hunting, time trials, and you can actually switch from first person to third person overhead camera with certain weapons too. And this game was also loaded with like a big ass noteworthy voice cast with like a lot of known people. Thomas Jane, let's see, Chris Christopherson, Brad Dourif, Ron Perlman, Tom Skerritt, a couple other noteworthy voice actors in Dave Wittenberg and Kath Soucie. And the voice of the main baddie is none other than Lance Henriksen. Probably one of the only other times you'll see him play a bad guy besides the Van Damme movie Hard Target. But yeah, Gun is definitely more fast-paced and intense. It's not as expansive, but I still think it's a pretty fun and enjoyable game despite a couple bumps. PC port's a little rocky in some places and I think crashed on me a couple times, but it's an enjoyable game. And if you want more third-person Western games but want a quick and easy fix, this one will do it for you. Rise of the Tomb Raider is next. I actually beat this game on my birthday. You see, I was building up to it because in the games I played in 2021 video, I mentioned that I did beat the first of the rebooted Tomb Raider trilogy. So, eventually I was going to make it a priority to go and beat Rise of the Tomb Raider, the sequel. And I have to say, I think I grasped in this one a bit more. It definitely isn't as... I don't know. There's definitely, it still has its intense moments like the past one, but it's not quite, I guess, as, say, gritty as the previous game, because the previous one, Tomb Raider 2013 game, definitely had its fair share of gritty moments, one of them even getting some controversy, but this one, not so much. It still has the dark feeling kind of to it, like, again, a dark version of the Uncharted games, which I'm pretty sure this is what they were always wanting to do anyways, but I do enjoy this game. Did enjoy it. I'd say I like it even more than the previous one. So, yeah. Looks good, plays good, and yeah, go play it. Ninja Blade is next on our list. This is a very weird game per se. This is one of those ones that was made by From Software before they became almost exclusively Soulsborne. It originally came out on the 360 and later re-released on the PC. Sadly, you can't get the PC version of it anymore as it got yanked from sale because I think the publisher no longer even exists, at least for the specific PC version, or the developer, one of the two. I'll look real closely, and while that is, Ninja Blade is pretty much like inspired by a lot of games like Devil May Cry and stuff, but it definitely leans more into quick time events, I will say, and it is very not easy. Yeah, here it is right here. The publisher was publisher and developer for the PC version was Novidisk. They're, I believe, a Russian company, but I don't think they even exist anymore, which may explain why the game was pulled. Because it was no longer been sold digitally since April 1st of 2022. But to be honest, the port itself is pretty rough, because high frame rates are a pain in the ass, and if you go above, there are definitely other bugs, poor collision physics, broken scripts, sound-related issues possibly, and if you try and go higher than 60 FPS, you might have problems with finishing moves on regular enemies, which sucks because this game has a lot of context-sensitive actions too. It's almost like a prototype Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, but it's definitely a bit more rough around the edges. I will say that when this game does work, it can be fun, but you may be better off just buying the Xbox 360 version of the game itself. If you're in a PAL territory, you can get that for about $6, but it's starting to climb up in price to like $25 here, so maybe the price will get knocked down. I don't know. If it does, or you can get a good deal on it, play it there. Next up, we have Siphon Filter Logan Shadow. Remember how I mentioned Dark Mirror, basically, earlier? How I had to beat that to finally get to this? Well, after getting through other real-life stuff, I finally was able to get off my ass and beat this one. Logan Shadow is the second of the PlayStation portable Siphon Filter games that were ported to the PS2, and it was pretty much the last overall mainline game in the Siphon Filter franchise before, well, Sony decided to go and completely abandon it. It's probably my personal favorite of the actual games itself, despite falling on the lesser scale. But I did really enjoy this one, basically, here, for the more, I guess, jurisdiction conflict in the storyline as well. And the gameplay itself is probably improved in some parts compared to the previous game, Dark Mirror itself here. And it definitely is a pretty interesting little game here, and it kind of sucks, though, basically, that, this is the last one. I really wish they would make a new Siphon Filter, considering this has been the last entry in the franchise since technically 13 years when you count its PS2 release. But I don't know. The last game Ben Studio did was Days Gone, which I'll probably be making a priority to play this year on PC since I got it as a gift, but we'll see, but damn, I miss Siphon Filter. And to close out May, this is the first of many Retropalooza Houston pickups. This one I got from my man, Hav Geese, the almighty Hav Geese, Castle Shikigami 2, which I got for a good price at about $15 or so for the PS2. This is a shmup that has always been on my list, but I could never find it until more recently, and then boom, I get a hold of it at a good price, because the price literally had 15 on it, so we just went with that. Although, if you're watching this, man, sorry, but all of a sudden something else happened, and something game lands up on Steam now, or I don't know why I'm saying it. I don't know why I'm even saying it. It's tough, because I thought the game was still exclusive to the PS2, and I had picked up the first Castle Shikigami on Steam, because when that was released on PS2, it was released under the name Mobile Light Force, and the cover was made to make it look like something it wasn't at all. At least the cover here tried to make it more accurate. I don't know. It was frustrating here, me having to contemplate now. Do I really want to keep the game? Because, well, what happened was Castle Shikigami 2 got released on Steam. Yeah, surprised? I didn't even know it either until much later, actually, because all of a sudden, boom, this was a stealth release. Komodo here, who are seemingly, or rather, Degasika Games, they're labeled Komodo here. Maybe they're the subsidiary, I don't know. Ultimately, these are the ones, guys, who have been re-releasing. They re-released the first Castle of Shikigami, relocalized accurately, and they did that for this one too. But I will say, the PS2 version still has the infamous English dub. If you know anything about bad English dubs, you probably already know about this one, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But what I will say with the Steam port is that they relocalized it and retranslated it to be more accurate and left out the crappy English dub, likely for licensing issues. Although, you can put that back in, the subtitles aren't going to match, and yeah. As for the game itself, it's pretty much a shmup. It's not that much different from the first game. It is a bit harder, and you don't have infinite continues off the bat, so you will have to grind a bit more and more to get better. But it is worth it in the end, too, when you can properly beat it. So, yeah. Fun game, actually. A bit tough. And I did replay it on PC as well, and grind it the proper way, so yeah. And that wasn't the only set of Retropalooza Houston pickups, that one of the Retropalooza Houston pickups I had that I beat this year. For that, join me in June. So, June, we start off with more Retropalooza Houston pickups that I beat. First one of these is Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. When I was at the con, I met the main guy behind a Houston Retro Gamers group. His name is Kyle. Cool dude, and I kept going back to his booth quite a bit, actually, because I was able to get good deals on stuff when I was bundling things, and yeah, I'd say he was probably the most vendor I bought the most stuff from that weekend. So, yeah, this is the first one, because he had all the Scooby-Doo games on Xbox there. And this is the first one of them, Night of 100 Frights. So, it's an alright game, but I feel like this is one of those ones you will benefit from by playing in emulation because you have save states. Because otherwise, whew, oh boy, there's some rough bits. Now, Night of 100 Frights was actually developed by Heavy Iron Studios, the same people who later did SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, so you think would be in good hands, but sadly this game is a little rough around the edges. You pretty much primarily play as, well, the titular canine himself, and basically you have to search for the rest of the Mystery Inc. in a haunted mansion after they're kidnapped by an eccentric villain. There are 12 areas, and they pretty much range from areas you would expect. There's quite a bit of platforming, too. A lot of callbacks and recreations of scenes from the original show. And for fans of Scooby-Doo, you'll probably get a kick out of that. But otherwise, the platforming itself is not entirely complete. You have to collect specific amounts of stuff here to basically, like, there's usually, you have to get a certain amount of collectibles to progress, of course, in some areas, but honestly, it feels more grinding, at least here. And I'm just trying to process this here. I think I had some bad luck with other places, and some of the last set of bosses was rough. What's also pretty annoying, too, is that you can't really play this game on a 360. Well, technically you can, but it locks up at the final boss, meaning the game is pretty much unbeatable. So I had to play it on my original Xbox instead. The other two are just flat out not compatible on the 360 here. So here's the collectibles. Obviously, they're Scooby snacks, because what else they would be, and snack gates that open many of the doors. And you do unlock bonus effects. Like, the presentation is pretty good, but the gameplay itself is kind of a mixed bag. It would be nice to talk about this one in full at some point. I might want to save that. Next up, a little break from Retropalooza Houston stuff. Metro Exodus. I was playing this one on and off for a bit here after picking it up on a previous Steam sale, so I really did want to beat it. And I will say, it's actually a really damn good game. Having already played the previous Metro games, I figured this would be a good one to go through. And I will say this, it is to Metro what Far Cry 2 is to Far Cry, although I do think Metro Exodus is much better than Far Cry 2. It feels more polished, not as hectic, and more morality that actually makes sense here. And it's such a gorgeous game too, even though it takes place in a very gritty apocalyptic setting. Although the desert setting does help break that up a little bit, the monotony of it. It's still a pretty damn gorgeous game too, and yeah, and now that I have a ray tracing capable system, I do want to play the enhanced edition at some point, so I'll see about that in my spare time. We'll see. Back to Retropalooza Houston grind. The second of the Scooby-Doo games I got, Scooby-Doo Mystery Mayhem. And honestly, between this and Night of 100 Frights, I can't decide what was more frustrating. Mystery Mayhem, basically, Scooby and the gang here see that someone has released thousands of real ghosts from a book called The Tome of Doom. And so you have to solve mysteries and put the monsters back into it. This one is less open-ended than the previous game, definitely, but it's just as frustrating in some parts as well. You pretty much also, in addition to playing a Scooby, you can now play a Shaggy, and you've got about 5 levels here, basically, instead of one big open area, giant area. You can tell that this one is more linear, like I said, than Night of 100 Fridays, because that really leans into the Battle for Bikini Bottom sort of style that we would see in that game. But this is just your more average linear kind of ordeal. You'll find clues, of course. You'll have to use their abilities to solve puzzles, like getting under narrow spaces, and you can only play as one character in some of the levels, and then eventually use the tome to eventually defeat them. Although the book has no effect on human enemies or alligators, which you can only avoid. The tome itself is pretty helpful, and you can charge up to use magical wisps, collect along the way when the tome is low on magic, and just looking at all this. And the cool meter is basically your health meter. But in a way, it's still kind of some of the platforming, it does not feel as smooth as the previous game. In fact, I think actually it kind of got worse in some aspects and more frustrating. There is some bad I think there's even just, I can't remember if it was this or the other game. I think it was this one where the camera goes into this 2.5D kind of ordeal, but you just can't quite get where you need to go. This one was actually done by Artificial Mind and Movement, who later became Behavior Interactive. And did they do the follow-up game to this? I can't remember. Oh, they did actually, but we'll save that for later. Yeah, Mystery Mayhem is probably the worst one out of the bunch of the Scooby-Doo Xbox games. Next up is Metal Wolf Chaos. I already did a review of this game for July 4th, so I suggest you go watch my review, but basically this game has a bit of a learning curve, but once you get it down, it is actually very fun, and I may rebuy this game on GOG and stream it there, because why the hell not? Next up is WrestleMania X8, another Retropalooza Houston pickup, picked up from Game Guys, who were there with loads of GameCube games for sale, like almost every GameCube game you could think of. Even some very rare ones like Cubophore. But those were out of my budget. But this was not out of my budget, and I got it for a good price, so yeah. I'm trying to collect WWE GameCube games. I have this, and I also got Day of Reckoning from a different seller. But let's focus on, but I haven't played that yet, so we'll focus on this. WrestleMania X8 was the first of 4 WWE games on the GameCube. And these were, I believe this was also the first one on the GameCube to be developed by Yuke's, as Aki were the original developers of, say, all the classic N64 wrestling games for WWE and even WCW, but WrestleMania X8 was the first one done by Yuke's, who had the PlayStation SmackDown games under their belt, and they also had SmackDown Just Bring It as well. This game is very hectic as hell, and if you saw my stream about this one here, you know this game was up and down all over the place. I know wrestling games can get hectic, but the controls definitely take some time to get used to if you've primarily only played the PS2 SmackDown games. On top of that, multi-man matches in this game are way too much of a nightmare. I know they can get hectic in real life, trust me, I've seen enough to know. But holy shit, like when you're playing with the computer, it's even more frustrating because you could never get a good grasp. Triple threat pinfalls are always broken up. Enemies don't tend to stay down long enough even after you hit 2 finishers in a row, one on the opponent to take out, then one on the other to go down. It is just chaos. Like when you're playing with actual human players, it's fine. But the computers, you know, I do want to actually review this, so I might just leave it at that for now, but thank God I didn't overpay for this one. Okay, breaking from the Retropalooza Houston pickups, we have Manhunt on PC. This is another one in the list of games I never finished, but then I went back to finish, and the gameplay is a bit janky. Like, I get it. It is a stealth game, which kind of caught me off guard when I went back to revisit it, but then I realized, oh, this and that. Like, genuinely, Manhunt is a very difficult game at its core. And I don't think the gameplay is fully worked out because of the limitations of the renderware engine at the time. Like, if you were to make a modern Manhunt in the Rage engine, I think it would be absolutely gold. Unfortunately, we'll never see another game like that because Rockstar would rather just milk money with GTA Online, and they're definitely going to do it with GTA Online 2. And even then, even if they weren't in this case, Manhunt basically almost tore the company apart from the inside, so I doubt we'll ever see another game like it. Even though the gameplay can be a bit hit or miss at times, the atmosphere is on point, and the lore of it is so interesting. It's like, they actually managed to do this for a goddamn snuff film, basically. Basically, lore is there for a game where you play as a death row prisoner participating in snuff films to earn his freedom by murdering criminal gang members. If you can get the curve down with Manhunt, there is a lot of fun to be had. Well, I don't know if I can say fun. That might be putting it fucking lightly. What am I saying? Already this year is still bleeding into me. And yeah, I don't know if I call Manhunt fun. I'm taking that back. Creative and interesting, though, I would say it is. Because you just don't see anything like it. Will I play Manhunt 2? Maybe. I don't know. You can't buy it digitally, so I have to go out of my way and pull a Nulf with that one, but we'll see. Alright, let's go back to some lighthearted fun. The last of the Scooby-Doo games on the Xbox. Scooby-Doo Unmasked. Unmasked was also developed by Artificial Mind and Movement, but actually runs at 60 FPS, has a cel-shaded style look to it, and generally it plays more like a Crash Bandicoot game at points than it does the past two, which actually I think would be a better way for it. It actually plays much, much better than the other two, although there are still a few frustrating bits in this madness of mystery, but you know what? I would say this is my favorite out of all of them, because it plays the best and looks the best. It's that simple. Maybe I should review that one too, like the others. Alright, taking a little break from Retropalooza Houston stuff here. I have the Devil May Cry games, starting with Devil May Cry 1. You see, I had picked up the HD collection earlier in the year for a good price, but I never played, like, the first two games. That's actually why I picked it up, because I never played Devil May Cry 1 or 2. I played the Steam ports of 3 and 4, the original 4, but I will be playing the special edition at some point this year, because I did get it on a Steam sale. And DMC Devil May Cry. And now that this year I made it a priority to knock those two off the list. Starting with Devil May Cry 1. It's really not hard to see why this game eventually kicked off the series in such an interesting way, but I do feel like there are some parts of it that are just tough. It's kind of odd with the way this was designed, because this game originally started off as Resident Evil 4, but they felt it wouldn't fit the Resident Evil franchise, so it became its own title, and apparently a bug found in the original Onimusha actually somehow also led to inspiration of this game. Basically, during a test play, you could keep slashing enemies in the air by slashing them repeatedly, which led to the inclusions of juggles by gunfire and sword strikes in Devil May Cry. It definitely has the lore there still, and I do feel like when you can get around the controls, because it's one of those games from how earlier it was. I mean, this game originally came out in 2001, so it still has that old janky kind of Capcom edge to it, you know. Still, though, it is enjoyable, except for a few of those last sections. The last section before the infamous "I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light" scene, for example. The fight before that quote is so goddamn egregious, I wanted to just shout why. So there were some frustrating bits, and it definitely is a more time-based game, kind of, I guess, race against the clock and heavy combat focus too. And again, it still feels where the hell do I go, but you know what? A lot of the looks do help with that. Devil May Cry 2 is up next, and this may be a shocker for some of you, but I didn't actually hate this game that much. No, I didn't. In fact, I actually felt I had a less frustrating time with this game than I did the first game. I know, shocker, because when this game basically came out, it was not well received, or rather, it was a very polarizing game when it came out. And some of those changes I understand why, basically, and I can agree with like Dante's personality, how he barely speaks in the game as well, and some of the other stuff. And while it is a lower difficulty in some parts, I do feel that makes some of the more egregious sections in the game less frustrating. Although if you really want the challenge, you should just put it on Dante Must Die, but I don't even know if you remember if you have to unlock that or not. And chronologically, this actually takes place after Devil May Cry, of course, but actually takes place prior to Devil May Cry 4. This is another one where the chronology is all 7 shades of screwed like Metal Gear Solid, but who's even counting? And Devil May Cry 2 had 2 playable characters, so 2 campaigns, each on their own separate discs. To be fair, I do feel like it definitely is a bit easier. It's probably the easiest game in the entire franchise, and that may hurt it a little bit. But I did actually have a good time with this one. I'm shocked as well, and I didn't hate it as much as everyone says I should. I know. Alright, we got a couple more games here. This is the last of the Retropalooza Houston pickups for the month of June. Another one from Kyle's table. And this is actually the first thing I bought when I was at Retropalooza Houston. And I got this for 20 bucks. And I'm so glad I did. It's the Nightmare Before Christmas Oogie's Revenge. Now, I already did a pretty damn in-depth of this review of this game, but to recap, basically, the style and presentation are on point, but the actual gameplay, while it does take a lot of the good and elements of both Devil May Cry 1 and 2, it also takes a lot of those games' cons, and by and large, you have a mismatch of a game that's technically supposed to appeal to younger people, but it's also more confusing in some parts as well, and it definitely feels more like a Castlevania Lament of Innocence at times than it does Devil May Cry, but I guess maybe that was to help differentiate it from the other games. If you're a Nightmare Before Christmas fan, play it. Otherwise, just play something else. And the last game in general for the month, we ending on a PC game, Angry Video Game Nerd 2 Assimilation. I always struggled with this one too, like I did with the first game, so I was unable to come back to it basically, but eventually I got off my ass and I actually did beat it basically, so, and it only ended up taking me like 3 hours, so I can't really get too frustrated, whereas the original game was like goddamn 10 hours. I will say, I do feel like that's probably because they did a lot of stuff that helped differentiate it from the first game and maybe helped make some things a little bit easier for first-timers here, although I think if you would have played the previous game, you definitely would be playing this one. Not sure why you'd be playing 2 before 1 unless there's no chronological reasons, whatever. Assimilation 2, I think, definitely is a better game than the first one. There's a lot more cooler elements in the platforming that help make it easier. A lot of other cooler weapons. But a lot of the platforming stuff can get very, very damn frustrating in parts, too. So you better brace yourself. You're going to be swearing a storm like the nerd himself. Halfway through the year, halfway to go. Next game that was beaten was actually a local store pickup. I got enough trading credit, knocked the price from 180 to 100, and ended up with a copy of Futurama on the original Xbox. And boy, is this game only priced so high just because of the fucking license. It ain't for the game itself, I'll tell you that much. Truth is, I am a bit of a diehard fan of Futurama, so much so when I was in 7th grade, I wanted to use the episode Parasites Lost as sort of a video, sort of a deal, use it as an excuse to watch that because human body science class, yeah. It didn't quite happen, but you know what? I don't give a fuck. I really don't, because I do love the show that much. Unfortunately, this game, well, I don't love that much. I did review this one. It's very up and down. The ending is underwhelming and kind of a cop-out. The final boss is underwhelming in general. The platforming itself is a little bit of a mixed bag. And, Jeez, what else can I even mention with this thing? I mean, it does look good, and when it plays well, it plays well. Except Leela's sections, her combat sucks. But I already mentioned that in the review, and honestly, I don't even know what else more I can say about it, really. It's a shame. It's ridiculous that it's even priced this high, but hey, at least I got to take a bite out of it that way there. Let's move on to something a little bit better. Okay, the Capcom Beat 'em Up bundle is next. So, this is a compilation of classic Capcom beat 'em ups, basically, that include some of the obvious stuff, like Final Fight, but it also has some other interesting choices as well. So you got Final Fight, Captain Commando, King of the Dragons, Knights of the Round, and Warriors of the Fate. And now Armored Warriors and Battle Circuit are also available. Games that were not previously even available on consoles, period. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, but that said, Final Fight is still the only one that I think is the most worthy of the bunch, personally. Because, well, it's the best. Maybe Captain Commando follows close in the other arcade exclusives, but I mean, if you do want longer beat 'em ups and stuff like it, genuinely, it is a pretty good compilation for what it's offering. And if you like beat 'em ups, go for this one. Next up, being on July 4th, AVGN 1 and 2 Deluxe. So, Angry Video Game Nerd 1 and 2 Deluxe is a re-release of the previous two games that are bundled into one. And basically, it also ports the first game in a way into the newer game's engine, while also making improvements in other places, and also cutting out characters that were featured in the previous games, such as the Nostalgia Critic here and more. Sorry about that. There was a friend just called me there on Discord. He has custom sounds, and that sound is possibly a teaser for what's to come next. But back to AVGN 1 and 2 Deluxe. They're probably the best versions of the game you can play if you want to put up with the changes that they made. And they're not overly major gameplay changes, but if you were a fan of the previous ones, you will probably be let down, unfortunately. So, meh. Anyways, next up, Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. The remake, if you will. This was a modern, updated version of, well, Castle of Illusion. The original game was a Sega Genesis game. And it came out all the way back in 1990 from Sega themselves. And it's actually the first in the Illusion series that they did, as they would make several other games in this series. Land of Illusion, World of Illusion, and Legend of Illusion, all starring, well, that lovable little mouse. This version, though, that I'm mentioning is a 2.5D updated version, a la something to the Klonoa games, and it's a nice little simple platformer. I do feel like it updated a lot of the good stuff as well, like kept a lot of the good stuff in the original Castle of Illusion while upgrading it to a modern 2.5D style of gameplay, basically. It's a pretty enjoyable little game. It's not too long, actually, though, because this was a downloadable title originally only. Well, actually, it might still be downloadable only, but you know what? It's a fun game nonetheless, basically. And I suggest you do buy it, because for a while it was delisted from September of 2016 to March of 2017, but you can still buy it as far as I know. Let me see. Yep, it's right there and on Steam sale, $3.74. That's a good price for this game. It's not long. You can finish in like a couple hours if you know what you're doing. Actually, my playtime is a little under 2 hours, but yeah, it's a good game. So after Castle of Illusion, I played Paint the Town Red. Paint the Town Red is one of the most creative sort of games I've ever played. Like, imagine a more violent, like, Nobody. Like, I don't know if you know the movie Nobody with Bob Odenkirk, but kind of think that mixed with a bit of Minecraft as well, but way more violent and bloody and over the top, and it is just the most insane batshit thing you can ever play in your life. It really is such a creative game too. It's like you beat people up in the basic scenario levels. And then and you basically be the last man to survive, basically. And it's not easy. Then you have the epic roguelite Beneath, which isn't really my style per se. And it ended up just, well, training my way through that sucker there, because no time and all. Even though it ends up like 12 hours total with everything. I think it's like 8 hours for that, and 4 hours if you're just going to go through the base scenario. The game was in early access, but it's been out for a good while now with this mode. It's definitely a very fun game per se. It is tough, and you're going to have to grasp some of the curves, but if you do, it's very rewarding, and it's very, it's creative, I will say that. Violently creative are the two words to describe this game. Now we're going back to the 2.5D madness, Klonoa Door to Phantom Isle. Now keep in mind, this is part of the Klonoa Fantasy Revire series. From the moment I saw this was announced, I knew I wanted to get this because, well, I had never played Klonoa 2, only the original Wii version of Klonoa. And even then, many people would consider that remake inferior to the original game. However, it's kind of weird. You see, this version of the collection runs a full 60 frames per second, or an unlocked frame rate if you're playing on PC like I did, which its system requirements are low enough, and and it runs smooth. It's actually built in Unity engine, so it has very easy requirements. So it's weird, because the first game is technically built from the 2008 Wii remake, but it plays more like the original, because there's no English voice acting. It uses a lot more of the designs from the original as opposed to there. And in generally, I'd say it's definitely more like what happens if you actually did a proper remaster of the original game for the Wii, rather than a remake, like what happened there. And the thing is, they were going to do that with Klonoa 2, but that didn't happen because it sold poorly. But with this remaster of the two games, I hope eventually more people pick up on this and realize how great of a franchise Klonoa is. Although that last level in the first game can buy me. Otherwise, the game is a damn crazy little game, but I really do love it a hell of a whole lot. And, yeah. And so the first one is still good, but the last bits are rough. Klonoa... Oh, wait. I'm skipping ahead. Sorry. Let's go back a little bit. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance is actually nice. We'll get to Klonoa 2 soon enough. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance was one I picked up in 2021 from Hav Geese at Retropalooza Houston 2021 for $5 with a few other Xbox games. Or one Xbox game, Gauntlet Sorrows, and one PS2 game in Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories for $15 total. But yeah, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. This was the first 6th gen, a proper 6th gen Mortal Kombat game built from the ground up. No MK Gold. I like you, but you're just an upgraded Mortal Kombat 4. So that means this was the first Mortal Kombat for the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. And so basically, this had no preceding arcade release too, which means it was all consoles. The story focuses on an alliance between Quan Chi and Shang Tsung and their schemes to revive an ancient army to conquer Outworld and Earthrealm. It's also the only entry in the franchise to not feature series protagonist Liu Kang as a playable character. And it was also the first game in the canon series to not have the involvement co-creator John Tobias, as he left midway 1999 to pursue other interests. That said, this is still a pretty good game. A lot of the designs of the characters are pretty damn good and are still better than a lot of the modern Mortal Kombat games. On top of that, actually, a lot of the effects were cool as well. But unfortunately, the Conquest mode is not all that. It's not a proper story mode like, say, Deception here, or even the later MK games like MK9, 10, and 11. Instead, it's more of a tutorial for you, basically, to complete combos, basically. The missions are just you completing combos, basically. And then eventually you can defeat opponents after the combos. Do you remember what I said with Injustice 2 about how NetherRealm games are known for having you pull off crazy combos? Well, you better bet your fucking life that you can pull these off here, because you have to do that for some of these. And some of these combos get downright evil. Try doing it with a busted controller. Oh my goodness. It is the most crazy, insane thing in the world to do. And even when you complete the conquest mode, you don't tend to unlock everything. You still have to go through the crypt, basically, to unlock other stuff. And, mind you, you won't have enough coins even by the end regardless. You'll have to play through the other modes to get all the other proper endings and stuff. Regardless, I do really like this game still and think it's a solid entry. But I definitely do think in some other places it left a bit more desired, created by the other Mortal Kombat games that came out after it. Another Winged Cloud novel, visual novel, same crap, different day. Sakura Succubus 6. The 6th part in the series. Hiroki, through his harem of adoring women, couldn't get any bigger, or thought it couldn't get any bigger, but a genuine European princess has taken the liking to him. What's a disgustingly popular guy to do? Pfft, you're not gonna find out. Next. Burnout 2 Point of Impact. This was the only of the original console Burnout games that I had never beaten, basically, out of the trilogy. And after 100%ing it, I can say that this is a much, much better game, basically, than Burnout 1. Like, I want to do a separate review of it, but long story short, it fixed all the bad with Burnout 1, introduced the crash mode, and improved a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, it's worth it. Now we can get to Klonoa 2. Klonoa 2, despite a couple more drawn-out sections and parts, I do think is a better game than the first one overall, and I do think it's definitely worth your time if you get around to it, actually, here. If you do. Like, it looks better, plays better, and it still has more better music and stuff, and a couple bonus sections, like some hoverboard sections, too. Add another one to the list of games I never beat previously, but all of a sudden had an urge to. Burnout Paradise. It's open world Burnout. It's fun. I still really enjoy it, but I think it's like my 3rd favorite Burnout game of the bunch, behind, you know what, I'm going to save that for when I review the Burnout games separately, but play Paradise if you want open world Burnout. Now, I don't normally talk about replays very often. I don't talk about game replays often when I do this sort of thing, but there's one replay I wanted to talk about, basically, and that is Cuphead. See, when I first played this game, I played it like crap. Basically, I was more into the actual lore and the other stuff than the actual gameplay itself. And considering I was more used to running guns like Metal Slug, I didn't gel with Cuphead at first, so I brute forced through a training way without parrying and played it like crap. However, with the release of the upcoming DLC that came out, the Delicious Last Course, I felt an urge to actually go back and give this game its proper play over. So I actually went back, I learned how to play it properly, how to parry, which I will tell you is flat out important as shit to do, and I actually got good enough and legitimately did beat Cuphead, to where I would have gotten every achievement legitimately through Steam. And holy shit, that was more rewarding. It was definitely frustrating and not easy in some parts and made me want to break my foot off in someone's ass or get Rain Brady to choke a cup. But for the most part, when you master Cuphead, it's actually damn good. The thing is, a lot of the bosses each have different strategies to themselves. And I want to do a Twitch-style stream, like a Bootsy Beat style thing, where I go over the strategies I use to help me beat it. And then basically say, hey, these are my strategies, they might help you. I will probably buy it on GOG again and play it through, because now I have a stronger appreciation for Cuphead. I love it. Oh boy. Anyways, now we get to do Crisis. Yes, the old benchmark tool. Can it run Crisis? What a common question, might I add, basically. Oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. You know what? I think this game is really just more of an overglorified tech demo. Even when it comes to actual first-person shooter standards, while I do appreciate a lot of the open-endedness, it still has the overly difficultness of Far Cry 1. No surprise, it was made by Crytek. And on top of that, I don't think, like, the story isn't too grasping. I do feel some sections get drawn out in parts. And by and large, I feel like in the grand scheme of first-person shooters on PC, when you compare it to, say, the Half-Life games or the No One Lives Forever games, I really don't think it compares. It's not a bad game by any means necessary, but it's not one of my personal favorites. Now here's an unexpected Steam sale pickup. Asterix and Obelix XXL Remastered. Well, this game was actually, you may remember, as Asterix and Obelix Kick Buttocks. It was Hidden Gem by Metal Jesus on the PS2, but it went down in price. But all of a sudden, it's like there's this modern re-release, so you don't even need to buy the older version. You can just buy this re-release. And this remaster's pretty good. It updates the graphics to look better than the original. More details, more lighting, and all that jazz. Although, in terms of actual gameplay, I do feel like this one kind of drags on in some parts. Like, early on, it's paced well enough, but then the pacing starts to slow down because the game gets more difficult later on with all the collectibles and other stuff. And some of the other bosses are ridiculous in parts, too. And it's definitely not a bad platformer, but I'm not in any hurry to buy the sequels. I'll say that much. And to close out July, heavy freaking rained. Yeah, I remember when I said Quantic Dreams will give you a run for your money, or basically get you sucked into these stories. Well, here's the big one for you. Heavy Rain. Now this game basically here is basically heavily inspired by the movie 7. It's basically a murder mystery in the guise of an adventure game. There are 4 protagonists involved with the mystery of the Origami Killer, a serial murderer who uses extended periods of rainfall to drown his victims. The rainfall, pretty much a reference to 7. I'm just going to sum it up plain and simple, because if I have to think about this any longer, my head will fall over. I'll feel dizzy. If you like the movie 7, you're probably going to enjoy this game. It's very similar to tone in that regards, too. And a lot of the issues that were fixed in Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy have been fixed in this game, too. Making it well more rounded, in my opinion. Way, way better in that regards. And quite frankly, I actually did get a big kick out of this game because I really do love the movie 7. Anyway, that's going to do it for July. And the last real month of the summer, August, has now commenced upon us. We start with Crisis Warhead. This game is a simple expansion pack of the first Crisis, and it puts you, well, in a different position of a, well, different player character. In the case of Warhead, basically, you play as, well, British SAS Sergeant Michael Psycho Sykes, basically, and what's going on with him, while, what's his name? I forget the protagonist of the first one. He's not exactly a memorable one. But, Nomad, yeah. While Nomad is doing his ordeal, by and large, it's much of the same as the first Crisis game. The only difference is that it is, well, it's a shorter game, basically, than its predecessor, because, well, obviously it's an expansion pack, and it's only like 3 hours. In fact, I beat it in my straight one and only stream for the game, so, yeah, fine, though, for what it is. Oh boy, next up is a big one. Metal Gear Solid 3, Subsistence. You see, I had been meaning to go and finish. Since I had already beaten the last 2 Metal Gear Solid games, I figured it was only fair to go back and beat the next 2 in the Legacy Collection. And we start with Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. Well, chronologically, this is actually the first game in the franchise, because it takes place in 1964. However, this game didn't come out until 2004, basically, and of course has been re-released several times over. By and large, I'm going to say it straight up, this is probably the best out of the original lineage of games, like from at least the PS2 era, or at least from the first 3 games. I feel like this is the best one of the bunch. This is when the gameplay was finally perfected, especially if you play Subsistence, where you actually have the third-person camera, so, you know, it's not just crazy blind aiming, shoulder down, top down, over the sort of top-down-ish GTA kind of view, old school, but nah, you get the full perspective here. The story is the strongest, basically, of these games, pretty much, as it's pretty much the starting domino for what would eventually be set up in all the later games. And by and large, it's a pretty damn good, rewarding stealth game. And actually beating this one legitimately, with only the help of, say, save states, because I played it in an emulator, I have to say this game was absolutely worth it. Abso-friggin-lutely worth it, too. And I love that theme song, too. Yeah, play Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. That is all. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 is up next. As I said in the review, I got this one for free through PlayStation Plus, because otherwise I wouldn't have played it. But having finally sat down and played the game, yeah, my review still stands at the perfect 5 out of 5 I gave it. This game pretty much took the best aspects of the original set of games, especially at least up to, say, the underground stuff, while translating that into the older maps with more modern-looking graphics and stuff, most of the original soundtrack, a whole host of new other features to increase replayability, and it's just a fucking great game. Like, honestly, I love this game. And if I can get a physical copy on PS4, or hell, if someone in Activision finally decides to put the fucker on Steam, I'll buy it, okay? Like, it really irked me it being an Epic Games Store exclusive, which it still is as of writing. I don't understand. I don't understand, and I don't think I want to. Alright, finally finishing off the Metal Gear madness for August, at least in the storyline of Solid Snake. Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. I'm not gonna string together a long sentence of words. I'm gonna keep this simple. Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots is one of the most emotionally intense video games I've ever played. The highs, the lows, every crazy darn segment, every frustrating segment. For Christ's sake, even the ending battle, even though it's so simple, what it symbolizes is intense as hell, especially with the music that plays. Again, play Metal Gear Solid 4. Now we go back to PC shooters and Crysis 2. And boy, Crysis 2 was a serious letdown compared to the first. I feel like because they were developing it for consoles, in addition to PC, like at the same time, the game suffered a lot from being very consoleized, basically. More limited weapons, a more linear-ish path from the original game. And in general, it just wasn't as good. And there was very many more frustrating segments as well. The only really better thing I can say is that at least it's more optimized than the original game, so, Anyways, next up for August is Drakengard. This is one of the ones I picked up, I believe. Yeah, it was this in 2022 from the almighty Hav Geese. Once again, got it for a good price because it was missing the manual. Eventually, I made the copy complete, and I played the shit out of it. Drakengard is a very weird mix between Dynasty Warriors and what would happen if you took Ace Panzer Dragoon and made it more like Ace Combat, but still with flying dragons and all. Overall, it's basically a decent starting point for what would eventually become the Nier franchise, basically. For what would become Nier, and then Nier Automata, and Nier... Okay, that's Reincarnation, but that's a mobile game, so we don't talk about mobile. Anyways, Drakengard 1 still has some of the problems of Dynasty Warriors, but a lot of the flying dragon stuff is pretty damn fun for the most part. Yeah, I liked it. Back to the Metal Gear Solid train for a moment to finish off the 5 lineage. We start with Ground Zeroes. This is more of a tech demo, really, for what the Fox engine could do, and was basically a short mission, basically, that takes place 10 years or so. Or almost 10 years? No, it's 9 years. 9 years before the events of Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. And it plays really well, basically. I think this is where they really took a lot of the good from Metal Gear Solid 4, like how it played. Really updated it even more, made the game look even more graphically impressive than Metal Gear Solid 4. And I have to say, I really friggin' like this game a hell of a whole lot, even if it is on the short side. And a lot of that good would be carried over into the Phantom Pain and then some. Really, then some. More on that later. And finally, to close out the trilogy of Quantic Dream madness is Beyond Two Souls. This is definitely the less eerie, I guess. This is, well, to close it if I were to categorize them all by film genre, I would say Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy is a supernatural horror murder mystery. 7 is just a straight up murder mystery thriller. And Beyond Two Souls would probably be more of a sci-fi-ish kind of drama, basically. At the time, basically, it was another weird game, but it was very bizarre. The main character you as here is a character known as Jodie Holmes, who was portrayed by, well, the former Ellen, now Elliot Page. And so, Jodie basically possesses supernatural powers through her psychic link to Aiden, who is this sort of incorporeal entity, basically, who's like a soul, basically, hence the name of the game, basically. And Willem Dafoe also stars as Nathan Dawkins, who's sort of a researcher in the Department of Paranormal and Jodie's surrogate father figure. It is a very long process to develop the game, as there was actually even a lot of motion capture, as well as on-set voice acting and motion capture done by the actors themselves when they were brought in. It definitely, I think, further fixed a lot of the problems seen in Fahrenheit and even Heavy Rain for that matter, but the story is not as good as the other ones, if you ask me. And it is definitely an intense friggin' game, to say the least, basically. Again, like the others, not as much, but there's definitely some parts of it that stand out. And I think basically that was enough of in Quantic Dream stuff for the year. Pray for me whenever I play Detroit Become Human. Alright, normally I wouldn't talk about other replays, but the last one to close out August, I went back and revisited Halo Reach, but I played it on PC because I had the Master Chief Collection, and I wanted to play them all in proper chronological order. So we're starting with Halo Reach. Halo Reach, despite chronologically being the first in the game series, was the last game that Bungie had released. It basically was them at the top of their game, and it was like a swan song, basically, for them. And Reach, honestly, was such a damn gripping story, even though you kind of sort of knew that things weren't going to end well, a la Rogue One. It's like the Rogue One of Halo for this specific group of Spartans, basically. But their part, basically, of them getting Master Chief into space and ready out there, much like the group of rebels getting the plans of the Death Star out. It went a long way in the long saga, basically, that was the original trilogy for Star Wars, and in this case, the original set of games for Halo, the original trilogy for Halo. Speaking of which, as we enter September, we continue down familiar territory, going down to Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. I should say, by the way, playing these through the PC version of the Master Chief Collection on Steam, I will say that definitely there feels like some improvements, basically, between Anniversary, like the original 360 versions of Reach, Anniversary, Halo 3, 3 ODST, and possibly 4. Well, I didn't play the original 360 version of 4, but knowing how the others unfolded, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some good improvements. But Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary was a very well done game that basically took the original, updated it with modern graphics and newer improvements, and yeah, it still keeps a lot of what made the original game so damn good. And you could toggle between the remaster and original visuals, which was also something you could do in Asterix and Obelix XXL Remastered as well. You could switch between the original graphics and the newer graphics. And honestly, the original Halo, despite some still frustrating sections, is still a damn good game. One of my favorites. Now we go to Halo 2 Anniversary. Again, Halo 1, much of the same thing here. Although it was my first time playing the particular Anniversary version of Halo 2. It's basically like Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, but with Halo 2 Anniversary. It does feel a little more power-hungry and somewhat unoptimized. But again, it still keeps a lot of the good of Halo 2. And, you know what, I just still really love this one to death. I love the soundtrack, although I wasn't a huge fan of the remixed soundtrack, shall we say. You still can't go wrong with the original. But hey, when you switch to the original graphics, it does help still that you can it still helps that you can basically still flip back to the original, and the soundtrack will still be there. So, yeah. Honestly, though, I have to say, Halo 2, I still really do, despite all the controversy that happened when it came out because of the way the story went and the sort of change where you play as Arbiter for parts of it, kind of like the whole Raiden ordeal in Metal Gear Solid 2. I still really like Halo 2 a hell of a whole lot. I even love it because it's still a damn memorable game, and when the good hits, it really hits. Halo 3, though, I still think is one of the pinnacles, if not the pinnacle, of the original Bungie games. I did a stream of it many years ago, and revisiting it about 5 or so years later, yeah, you know what? It still really holds up. I'm not even gonna lie. It's still my favorite. I still can get it through it in like 6 hours or so. And I have to say, you know what? It still has a strong story, even though there were some too bold choices in there. But you know what? I still really do enjoy it. And that ending section where you're with the Warthog is damn memorable, where you're just driving, escaping basically, and you jump into the ship, and yeah. You know what? I don't even need to say much more. Halo 3 speaks for itself. Halo 3 ODST is a solid expansion that is basically a sort of prequel-ish to Halo 3 proper. It takes place after the events of Halo 2. And I do have to say, actually, despite being an expansion, it's still a damn good game. A lot of the urban warfare you go through is very different from what you normally would expect in Halo. But it still creates a nice, different change of pace in scenery, and it still stands out. It has a very melancholy but memorable soundtrack. And again, it's like another Rogue One ordeal, basically, here for Halo. Only I think this is probably the better of the... Actually, I kind of think this is the better of the two compared to Reach, personally, because easier for me to get through this one, and yeah. Finally, the last of the Halo run is Halo 4 to close out the Master Chief Collection ordeal. Halo 4 is really not as good as the others, but still good enough, I suppose, for the most part. There feels like some contrivances in the story, basically, and it does feel like it probably shouldn't have even been, but, you know, Microsoft has to make their money and all. This one was really more closer to 7 hours, but I pushed on towards the end, basically, in the second part, and the cutscene really pushed it, but goddamn, we'll be damned if that ending there doesn't... It hurts the heart, you know what I mean? Especially if you've been playing since the original set of games. Yeah, I still liked it. And I did like some of the other changes in there as well, but not all of them. Blood Rain Betrayal is up next, and this was actually a warm-up because I ended up buying Fresh Bites on a sale because I wanted to play it for the horror-themed month. And so, I ended up getting the original with it because they bundle it in there for whatever reason. And so I thought I'd play it as a warm-up. Blood Rain Betrayal is what happens when you make a Symphony of the Night-like ordeal, basically, for Blood Rain, except much shorter. You gotta keep in mind, this game was also another download-only title originally. Much like Castle of Illusion. And, I don't know, I feel like since Limited Run had announced this at their show, there's probably a physical. Yeah, there was, because Limited Run Games did a physical of the remaster, but yeah. But Blood Rain Betrayal definitely does have some lackluster stuff compared to the remaster version, and there's definitely frustrating parts in some bits too. And it basically boils down to, well, your patience may or may not be tested if you can't figure this shit out. So let's skip it. Or not skip it, let's just end it there and go to the next one. I'll talk more when we get to the remaster. And to close out September, I wanted to get an early start on Horror Month, so I booted up a game I haven't played in a long time, but ended up buying off a GOG. The Suffering. The Suffering is one of the most messed up horror games you can ever play in your lifetime. It takes place in a prison. I kid you not. You play as Torg, a prisoner on death row for allegedly murdering his ex-wife and 2 children. I say allegedly because he has no memory of committing this crime. After he arrives at Abbott State Penitentiary on Carnate Island off the coast of Maryland and is locked up, an earthquake hits the island, resulting in the prison being attacked by these supernatural threats from the island's past. After being freed, you have to fight your way to freedom while confronting your own personal demons as Torque, all while attempting to remember what really happened. Now, this game has 3 endings depending on the choices you make throughout, which feels a different version of the murder of Torque's family. And some people said that this game blend of action and horror didn't work. I actually am quite contrary to that, because I do think it actually plays pretty well for the most part, but there are a couple sections that are not that easy to understand. Going by one of my streams where I end up taking an hour more to figure out one of the parts on the last level. So that may have been the only part there, and the game was not sufficiently scary, although I do disagree as well. A lot of the murders that were based off, a lot of the creatures you fight were based off methods of execution, like the electric chair, lethal injection, old traps, and it is downright creepy. Just thinking about it scares me. It is more action horror, the designers said that, as opposed to survival horror like the games of that era, the Resident Evil games of that era, and same thing with Silent Hill and Fatal Frame. And the morality system is actually nice as well, and I have to say, it is definitely, if you love horror games and you haven't played these, pick these up on GOG when they're on sale. I guarantee you will have one hell of a time. Sadly, with that sale basically being over, oh, would you look at that, another one. But are they on sale is the question. No. But when they do go on sale, go buy them. You can get them cheap, and they are worth it. I actually... Well, hold on. I gotta hold my horses there. Let's properly transition into October. Now we get to the start of horror month proper, bleeding in. I just wanted to get an early start, you know. So, picking up where we last left off once again, The Suffering Ties That Bind. This sequel basically takes Torque off the island and into the city. Unfortunately, a lot of those creatures have now attacked the mainland, basically. They're attacking the mainland in Baltimore, basically, Torque's hometown. And now, once again, we must battle, basically, the demons and confront Torque's nemesis, a mysterious criminal kingpin known as Blackmore, who is voiced by the late Michael Clark Duncan. If you have a save game from The Suffering, you can actually choose one of 3 different openings based upon the ending you received in the first game. And much like the previous game, this one also fixes a lot of this, also has a morality system and 3 different endings depending on your action throughout. While some criticize it as being too similar to the original, I do feel like that this game is more basically better than the original in some regards, as it's more easier to navigate the game world compared to the previous. You won't get stuck in any particular section for like an hour at a time. And I do think the story really takes things to a more, I guess, personal level, because Torque was more of a silent protagonist in the first game. Well, he doesn't still say a whole lot in this game still, but for the most part, I do think it tries to go into that place there more and more, although never quite enough. Blackmore's very mysterious indeed and creepy as hell, and well, depending on what you do, you basically here, it is a very bizarre game, to say the least, just like it is. Maybe not quite as scary, but still pretty interesting, to say the least. I do feel like, yeah, even despite having only 2 weapons at a given time, yeah, I do feel this is a better game than the original, which is kind of shocking. It plays better. Now, I decided to revisit an old favorite for Horror Month in its original version, Doom 3. Doom 3 is a very interesting game here because it deviated a lot from the original set of games. So, more often than not, you end up instead playing basically more of your atypical, I guess, first-person shooter of that era. But this game was definitely right in the action horror category itself. And it was, well, basically pseudo-ish remake, reboot, excuse me, whatever you want to call it, I don't know. Because it ignores the events of the previous games and goes straight into this one while still keeping the basic story. At the time, Doom 3 was pretty much, it's the most successful game by id Software to date, and it was basically, it was one of those games that was really like a powerhouse for technology at that point, much like Half-Life 2 in that era. This is the type of thing you'd build a new PC for. And it was kind of surprising, although that flashlight thing was annoying, where you could only hold the flashlight with one hand and not a gun at the same time. I understand, basically, why it was done, but still, at least they fixed it in Doom 3 BFG Edition. Some of the aesthetic changes are better here, though, than in Doom 3 BFG Edition. But there are still some other issues here that was fixed in the BFG Edition. If I could take the good out of everything here in the original, and basically the good in BFG Edition, my personal, like, make your own version to customize it. Oh, there's probably a version already out there, knowing how modded and well supported this game is, because it is damn good, but definitely it doesn't pull any punches at all. Oh, brother, we have to deviate. Alright, Sakura Alien 2. No, this was not streamed. It's another Winged Cloud visual novel. Alien Princess declares herself future wife for our protagonist, but things get crazy. Appearance of new beautiful professor at university who seems, well, let's just say, a little too interested in, and what will happen next. Anyway, now, meanwhile on Twitch, I play the expansion pack for Doom. Doom 3 and the Resurrection of Evil. This was a shorter expansion pack, basically, that took place after the main game, I suppose, here. Or is it? I can't even remember, but basically, this game did release afterwards here. Oh yeah, it does. 2 years after the events of Doom 3. It's a very bizarre little game here, expansion pack 2, but it has a new campaign, basically, once again, you discover this hellish device, basically, that the UAC detects from one of their Martian satellites, basically. And because after they found that, they sent a team to investigate, and hell forces are alerted, and you have a new invasion. You discover the device, and you fight your way to reach the doctor while being chased by demons. It's a very bizarre game, again, much like the original. It's very much good like the original, but also does have its problems. Thankfully, with it being an expansion pack, it's over before it even really starts, so yeah. Not much more to say here. Next, Obscure 1. The Obscure games were, I guess, were more modern horror from the 6th gen, inspired to take a more Resident Evil, I guess, oriented direction. However, it does tend to mix in a little bit of the faculty because the game takes place at this boarding kind of school known as Leafmore High. And so these teenagers here set out in search of their missing friends, basically. And so basically what happens is that they get locked inside the school overnight, and then they have to get to the bottom of these occurrences. You pretty much do standard survival horror things. You explore the school and find infected people, basically, and battle them. You'll knock them down with melee weapons, and you'll shoot them with guns. And you actually have multiple different playable characters here that basically are the main group of friends. And you can actually play the game even entirely in co-op. In fact, actually, you can even attach a flashlight to a firearm for when shit gets dark as well. Each character also has their own special abilities. Josh here, basically, the reporter for the school paper, can tell if there's anything left to do in an area, so you're never entirely lost about where you need to go, as well as pick up items or locations to advance the storyline. Stanley, basically, is able to pick locks and can break into rooms. Kenny is basically, well, probably the strongest of the bunch because he's an athlete. Shannon here basically is able to heal 20% more than normal with a health item, and even provides tips on puzzles and heals wounds. Ashley basically can rapid fire a pistol and deal more damage with most weapons. You're going to want to use each one of them, and you're going to want to keep them alive, because at any point they can die over the course of the game. And you have to be careful and make sure to prevent their deaths, so you can get all of them and get the best ending possible. I'm actually glad these were re-released on Steam, because otherwise they are kind of expensive for PS2 and Xbox. So just buy them on Steam and get them cheap. They're cheap during the winter sale, so just do that. Obscura 2: The Aftermath was the natural follow-up. I was actually let down with this one. For starters, there's not really any way to save most of the newer characters to a degree. Two of the other characters basically get completely yeeted off with a very minimal expectation that if you don't find the puzzle for, you won't even know unless you look it up online. And the last boss is such a freaking mess, and try doing it while being egged on. In a way, I feel like it ruins the game basically towards the end. Like, they try to make some of the better aspects, gameplay and parts, but the design of the levels themselves is so frustrating. Like, it just... Ugh. I don't know. I feel a little let down by Obscura 2. There was a sort of there was gonna be a third game. Unfortunately, the developers shut down, and they were even probably gonna do a prequel. But there was a pseudo-spiritual successor in Final Exam, basically. But I may save that for another time. Finally, Blood Rain Betrayal Fresh Bites. This was the remastered version of the original Blood Rain Betrayal, and boy, I don't think the game quite went the way I was hoping. See, the thing is, this version, while it does have updated 4K visuals, improved difficulty, and now fully voiced with Laura Bailey and Troy Baker reprising their roles as Rain and Kagan, respectively, alongside more from the likes of Todd Haberkorn and Patrick Seitz, it really doesn't fix that many of the actual gameplay problems, a lot of the frustratedness you will feel. Some of the platforming, there's still quite a bit to memorize, and I'm guessing they put so much of it in there because the game is not long in inherently of itself, because you can beat it in like 4 hours, because it was, I may remind you, originally a downloadable title. Unfortunately, though, I don't know, just... I felt more frustrated by the end, and even trying to fix this stream madness of crap basically started boiling down to 2 hours late. Not 2 hours late, it'd be a few moments later. If you go back and watch the VOD I put on Twitch, all those cutouts of a few moments later when it does the SpongeBob screen narrator, French narrator, that's actually me skipping all the bits I died, because if I left it in there, it'd be too much. Honestly, again, I feel like it just was another bit of a letdown, and oh well. Anyways, Sakura Melody. That's actually the last of the horror game of, but I did beat Sakura Melody for the last game of October in general. And lo and behold, it's a damn miracle. We have a Winged Cloud game that isn't just solely a visual novel. Now don't get me wrong, there is definitely still visual novel stuff in this game, but there's actually more to it. You now actually match puzzles and do other things to advance this idol group. You're playing as a rookie producer in the idol industry, and you actually help him shape 3 beautiful young women into multi-talented superstars. Plan your idol's routines, help them acquire fans, beat your competition, finding time to take them out on dates. We still gotta get that fucking harem shit in there and other stuff, but genuinely, it does at least seem like they tried. I suppose. Although, let's be honest, perhaps maybe naming the character, even though something is odd. Honestly, it's probably one of the better things Winged Cloud's done, but I don't want to spend more time on it. Let's just get into the month of November. Remember the 5th of November as the day I beat BioShock for the 2nd time, using the remastered version. Seeing as how it's been several years since I played the original BioShock, 5 years between November of 2022 and, well, spring of 2017, I figured playing this would be a good revisit to see, because it really was one of my favorite FPS games. And it still holds up very damn well. It's amazing atmospherically, it looks graphically impressive, it has a great soundtrack. Very intense as hell, and honestly, I'm glad I actually revisited it. In my spare time, I was ending up chipping away at a action game called New Legends on the original Xbox that I got for $5 4 years, well, it was 4 years ago at Retropalooza Houston for $5. Looking back at this game, it's really not an exciting game. It's kind of mediocre, basically. It was the only game released by the developer Infinite Machine, which was made of former LucasArts employees, as it was commercially a failure, and they were unable to get funds to develop Sam & Max Plunge Through Space, which was supposed to be an Xbox exclusive. It really sucks, actually. The game is very little rough around the edges. Some parts are more frustrating, and it doesn't even feel that long when it feels longer than it actually is, because it's like 5 hours here, but in reality, it felt much longer having to chip away. 5.5 more specifically. Yeah, if you're exhausted for action games, maybe go for it, but otherwise, don't. BioShock 2 is next. Since I beat the first one, I beat the second one, the original, because I played BioShock 1, then BioShock 2 Remastered. And BioShock 2 is also still pretty good. I think I've grown just a strong opinion about it as the first game as well, and in some regards I do feel there is some more improvements. And yeah, you know what? Actually, I don't even need to say much. I think the BioShock series in general always speaks for itself, and is one I will always look back fondly on. So yeah, let's get to the next game. Seablade. Oh boy. This was a game I picked up from my local shop for the original Xbox. It is a shooter, third-person shooter, mechish, whatever. It looked like a shmup. It was more of a third-person mix of Ace Combat, Mech Assault with some underwater good stuff. It's very mediocre. It's literally only, I think, 5 hours long. 4 hours and 40 minutes, so a little under 5 hours. And I don't even want to spend more time on this game, because it kind of looks meh. It feels where the hell do I go in times, or what the hell do I do, and it's just, nah. And to close out November, it's a big one. This game actually took up most of my attention throughout the month of November. I think I played it just about literally every day to chip away until I could no longer theoretically do so. Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Oh boy. What did they say that was like Skyrim, but with guns, basically? IGN, basically, and they said it 10 out of 10. No, it's not IGN. Memorable quote by Adam Kovic of Machinima, comparing Far Cry 3 with the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I don't really see that much. If between the two. If anything, this game is Skyrim with guns. Like, seriously. Like, how else are you going to describe it? I mean, this game is just the most intense shit ever. Like, it's very open world compared to the past Metal Gear games. And it is the Skyrim of Metal Gear games, plain and simple. You can play forever. Like, seriously, you can always redo side ops, basically, without even having to worry about much stuff here. And ultimately, it's just, you can do side ops endlessly, repeating them for more money when the game will let you. Repeat other missions, hunt other bases. It's a very expansive game. Very deep. And by and large, I think it instantly shot into my top 10 most Steam gameplays, just so I could get every side op and every main mission done, with only a little bit of repeats here and there. But yeah, this is the real Skyrim with guns. Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Hell, you don't even have to use guns, except in some other circumstances, so yeah. Let's go on to the last month. Which finally brings us to the last month of December. Gotta get everything in before the year ends. So let's start with a game that, oh, fuck me.
This is one I consistently was trying to play the hell out of from because someone I used to know played the shit out of it, and I got them both on sale from Games Belay for the price of, I guess, a little under 10. Puyo Puyo Tetris. This was the joining of two of the most well-known puzzle games in existence. In this case, you have Sega's Puyo Puyo, and well, it's hard to say who even owns Tetris specifically, but Tetris. This was actually the first Tetris-related title since Sega Ages 2500, the Tetris Collection. But holy fucking shit, this game is... Sonic Team was at the helm for this one, but honestly, I think they decided to overdo the kawaii factor. I'll just say that much. And I wouldn't have a problem with this if the game wasn't so brutally unfair in parts. Generally, I think the issue with Puyo Puyo Tetris 1 is that it's too damn difficult for its own good. For the most part, basically, I can get part of it, but trying to get into Puyo was definitely a bit rougher than it should have been. But even then, even on the Tetris side of things, which I feel does have some improvements in the actual sides of things compared to Tetris Worlds, ultimately, aesthetically, this game overdoes it with the kawaii. Every goddamn character is too... Like, I'll just say this. There's other things I want to say, but I probably can't because a whole bunch of people would come after me. So I'm going to just say this. The overly sweetness of this game is further egged on by the fact that it's brutally difficult. You will get stuck on certain levels for time at a time if you're not good at a particular game. Sometimes you have these various different modes where you'll alternate between the two styles, which isn't too bad in and of itself. And you'll have other different styles to clear specific rows at a time to the point where then you have an edge up on your opponent and you can just mash the buttons basically to take out their health bar and fatality them, if you will. Okay, not quite that in this. I mean, I oversaid this game is sweet. But generally the game is still hard because there's not any adaptive difficulty. I don't think there's even any difficulty settings whatsoever. And as far as I'm concerned, basically, the game itself overly is just too damn difficult. Like, when you get stuck, you are genuinely stuck there. You get your ass handed to you more often than not, and there's no leeway whatsoever. And so, basically, you have a game that what should take normally about 8 hours ends up becoming 12 hours. Oh, my fucking god. And the whole sweetness of it, I don't know, but this game was just way too overly sweet. Like, almost cartoony anime look to it. Really, really cartoony. Like, cute girl voices. Cute anime girls, basically. Cute anime, I guess, things that you want to just basically, that only say one word, like a Pokemon or a Digimon. But they're so squishy and fluffy, like a bunch of marshmallows, basically. At least one of them is. And just by the end, I was so pissed off with a lot of the difficulty and just going down over and over and over again. To the point where it just felt so longer. It's like you end up indulging in the game for far too long than you need to because of how difficult it is. And by and large, you end up feeling like, you know the episode of Little Bear Sweet Tooth? If I could just pull it up. Yes, I know what I'm doing here. No, you're not going to stop me from doing this here. I don't give a fuck. It's my channel. I can do what I want. But yeah, I remember by the end of Little Bear Sweet Tooth where he sampled just about every darn dessert away from the Harvest Day picnic games. To the point, basically, where by the ending pie eating contest comes in, well, he's too damn full to do a thing. Yeah, that was basically me with this game. Too full from the over sweetness of this, further egged on by crappy difficulty. Only this time it wasn't because of my own free will, unlike what happened in that episode. This is me basically doing this basically to try and beat the game, but the game kept handing my ass to me on a silver platter. Yes, I know I referenced an old 90s Nick Jr. show in this video. What the hell are you gonna do about it? Nothing. I'm sorry, I have some frustration still from this game, and I needed to get that off my chest, okay? Alright, we're gonna address the sequel. I know they tried to fix the difficulty with the sequel, but we have to take a sharp right turn and address another series I was working through. Uncharted, Drake's Fortune. Now, that's the first game. I ended up buying the Nathan Drake collection a while back with the desire to play through the series because I never did before. And if Sony's not going to release the first 3 on PC, I'm just going to get it out of the way now. Believe it or not, I never played the original Uncharted. So jumping into this was a very interesting experience. I feel like this is the best paced game out of the originals. It's definitely a strong, solid start for the franchise that would be to come. And I will say, it looks amazing, plays amazing, basically. Feels like a more modern-ish Indiana Jones. Only, like I said, more modern, memorable characters, and it's just a great game all around. And I feel like this was the template they definitely used for the modern Tomb Raider trilogy of games. So yeah, I liked it. Now we can go back to Puyo Puyo Tetris 2. Now I will say with this one, they did fix some of the difficulties too, as it actually did take me less time to beat the second game in the franchise than it did the first, as it only took me 8.5 hours, which is about right for what you would expect for what was said on how long to beat. The problem still, they try to fix the difficulty of sorts by using this new adaptive thing, but I don't think it worked out well. What made adaptive difficulty so frustrating with this game, the fact is, you basically, if shit is getting tough, basically, it'll knock it back down. But if you're doing good enough, the game will up the difficulty. The problem is, you cannot actually see in real time what the difficulty is. What a mess, basically. Unlike with God Hand, where you can see in real time, you can't do that with this. But yeah, and it has a lot of the same sweetness. Cute anime girls, cute anime boys for all the girls out there, at least. Hey, that's what they're probably going to say. I can already predict it before they even say it here, because I played enough of this damn one. Cute, things, you can't really call them human. Oh, and did I say that Sonic the Hedgehog's also finally in this one? Not in the actual story, but as a bonus character of sorts. Unfortunately, there's still some overly bullshit difficult sections. And need I mention they happen with one of the most ridiculous antagonists, in any game I've seen in Squares. This motherfucker is basically the second coming of Caleb Goldman from House of the Dead 2. The way he talks, he's so damn delusional, so set on doing this shit until the end. His master plan to take over the world or something, basically. I don't even remember. These are too damn sweet. Again, the story is too damn sweet. A lot of the same characters are. Everyone is basically neuralized back from the start. Look at this, basically. Some of them are more irritating, basically. One of them reminds me of Lucy Van Pelt from Peanuts. I can't fucking speak! I was gonna say something else. What is wrong with me? S. J and L, you won't even be able to tell who is who, basically, and it will shock you. And some of these other ones and a lot of the newer characters just fit the bill, I guess. I don't want to spend any more time on this. It's better than the first game, but honestly, I think I'm over this crap. I won't be in any hurry to buy a third one. Back on the Uncharted train, we have Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. This is the sequel that really was even better than the first for some, but I feel like the pacing in this one is very rough. Like, it feels more padded out. There's definitely more difficulty with the puzzles here, but the story is much better, too. than the first game. This is when they introduced Chloe Frazer, who is sort of a fan favorite, who is portrayed by Claudia Black of Farscape fame. And it's a very interesting game. I do feel like it does have some improvements from a gameplay standpoint, and the story is more intense too, but I do feel like it definitely feels a bit more bloated in some parts compared to the first game too. I thought the first game was well paced, but this one definitely doesn't. There's a flashback sequence that probably shouldn't have even been there in the first place, and ultimately puzzles are more difficult, so it definitely is a step up in that regard to the first game, but be warned. Now, next one. Oh boy, I got a juicy one for ya. Leisure Suit Larry Magna Cum Laude. Oh boy, the uncut and uncensored version. I picked this game up many years ago on GOG. Then when it came, I never finished it. When it came to Steam, I bought it. Only now am I going back and properly playing it. This was a very hard departure for the Leisure Suit Larry of games. The original set of games were these point-and-click adventure games. Unfortunately, this one decided to go way out off for that, basically. Also, the original games had this clever, double entendre speaking, wink wink, nudge nudge, innuendo stuff, basically. This game here, if you can't tell from the cover already, takes a completely different approach. Rather than doing the original style of humor, more subtle, this game goes balls to the walls, American Pie style of humor. Or for you older cats, Animal House. Actually, I think the better sort of comparison to make to this movie would be Old School. Or this game, comparing games to movies, would be Old School. And I'm going to say this straight up, this is the most perverted game I've ever played, but I'll be damned if this thing wasn't memorable and kind of outright hilarious. Man, there's so much shit I want to get into, but I can't even. I might want to do a giant Mudahar MGS4 style breakdown video about this game, because really, it is such a sight to behold, despite the fact that Al Lowe basically was not involved in any way, shape, or form. And when I say uncut, I mean uncut, because there is a lot of sexual humor. If you've seen movies, like I said, like Road Trip, Euro Trip, Old School, American Pie stuff, probably more American Pie too, because that's when they're actually college age, even though they don't really do so except for the opening scenes, because otherwise they're on vacation at a beach house. If you like movies like that, this game will be right up your alley. There's not much to the actual gameplay itself. It's really more of a minigame compilation. It boils down to the same 3 minigames. And by and large, if you're a fan of the older games, you're probably not going to enjoy this. But if you want some crazy early 2000s sex comedy, I guess, homage at times, or whatever the hell you want to call it, yeah. For the record, this game actually received an adults-only rating from the ESRB and had to be edited to receive a more commercial, mature rating in the US and Canada. Well, not just that, but Microsoft and Sony would not allow full frontal nudity in console games, basically. They had policies. The ESRB and them had all policies against that shit, basically. But the PC version, nope. All of it's there. Except at least in the US. But the Europe and the game was released unedited on all 3 systems, and did highlight the disclaimer that the packaging, it was uncut. And being re-released on GOG and then later Steam was kind of nice. And the game was pretty much so crazy there with this shit that it was even, both versions ended up getting refused classification and banned in Australia, because of course. So yeah, if you can't handle American Pie, or more specifically Old School, this game ain't for you. But if you can, it's kind of rewarding if you put off the gameplay. Finally, the last game to beat in the Uncharted collection, out of the entire Nathan Drake collection, Uncharted 3, still feels a little bit more paced out than the other Uncharted game. Feel a little more bloated than Uncharted 1, but not as much as Uncharted 2. It went back to the same sort of setup that 22 chapters that the first game did. Although it definitely moves more forward pace. But I will say there were some crazy set pieces in this one, much like the other two. the plane sequence, which I'm pretty sure they recreated for the movie itself. Not exactly, almost. And then there's a point where you're roaming around the desert, basically like it's friggin' Lawrence of Arabia. It's amazing this game turned out the way it did, considering Naughty Dog was split into two teams. While one team in 2010, one was doing this game, the other did The Last of Us. And it definitely is the most, I think, visually appealingest. There's a nice little flashback too, to give some context to how Drake and Sully met. And honestly, though, I feel like a lot of it definitely, this has to be the best of the original Uncharted games. Yes, I know there's Uncharted 4. No, I haven't played it yet. I will pick it up on PC. When I do play it, you will hear about it at some point. Now that we're done with Uncharted, we have another Sakura game, another Wing It Cloud visual novel, and Sakura Gem Girl. Oh boy, Gem Girls. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. You know what? You play Shohei, an average man working at a secondhand bookshop with his sweet, shy colleague, Asa. He has an unremarkable life until Asa suggests they join their local gym. Shohei meets two attractive women, his love life begins to hook up, and something giant harem, basically. Do I even need to go any further on this? No, I don't. Continuing another Retropalooza Houston pickup I had here, and the last one I would beat for the year overall, is Dirge's Cerberus Final Fantasy VII. This game basically is more of a background game that takes place in the compilation of Final Fantasy VII side stuff, which is a meta-series basically that helps, I guess, expand the world of Final Fantasy VII. There were a handful of games, of course, in this ordeal, such as Crisis Core and Before Crisis, but that one was more of a mobile phone game that only was released in Japan. But Dirge of Cerberus was one of the major console ones, per se. Also, Advent Children was a part of this in the film side, but Dirge of Cerberus was more of a third-person shooter than your typical RPG. While it does have RPG elements, it definitely leans more into the shooter side of things. You'll primarily play as Vincent Valentine, and this game is set 3 years after the original events of the game. And in his story, he's targeted by Deep Ground, and they want to awaken Omega with the ability to destroy the planet. So Vincent, and the help of some other friends, such as Yuffie, Cloud, Tifa, Bear, and all the standard people, although the last three do play a more minor role in this game, they're basically out to, stop this awakening at last. This is a decent little shooter. It's nothing too special per se, but I suppose for Final Fantasy fans, you're going to get more out of this with the lore. It's definitely a decent little third-person shooter, though, I would say. It's not too difficult if you play on normal, but if you play on a higher difficulty, you're probably going to be yeeted a bit more, but I digress. It's a fine little game, though. And finally, I beat one of my games I got on Christmas Day, and the last one to close out the year overall, because I didn't beat the one I wanted to in time, Lethal Skies 2. You see, I already played the first one, like, the previous year in 2021, but I could never find Lethal Skies 2 at any con, so I bought it off eBay, had it wrapped, and opened it up as a gift on Christmas. This is a flight combat game, very much like the first one, and whatever I said about the first one in my original time I mentioned it, basically it applies to this game here as well. You can beat it in a very short amount of time if you know what you're doing, and by and large, it is what it is still. It's definitely a shorter counterpart for Ace Combat, and Ace Combat can't quite compare to this, but for a quick hit of energy, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. Alright, except for like 3 missions are crap and the rest are fine. There you go. Alright, let's wrap it up. And that was just about everything I played in 2022. I hope in 2023 I continue to get more things out the door, basically. Knock more games off my backlog. I already knocked out 2 of them. One is a replay, the other was not, and bled in from 20 2022, but we'll see what we can do for 2023. Keep up the same good shit, and yeah. Actually, let me close that, fix that one there. Alright, so yeah. Expect the next review hopefully soon, and with that said, take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks for watching, and we will see you all next time. I hope all of you complete your gaming goals for this year, and game on, everyone. Thanks for watching.